the session. I'll be taking some time, about 1.5 hours with you all in the middle of the work session. We will be doing some work together. So I'm expecting your active participation in that activity as well. Okay, so let me start with a question. What to publish? This is the first question that we will get. Of course, you will write proposals, we will talk about many things, and you will do some research activities. But finally, what to publish? This is the first question that you will come across with. So very quickly, I will go through the types of articles that you can publish in the world of publication. Basically, there are 8 types of publications, starting from research, the most basic type, the most common type, I would say, the research or empirical studies, and then the case studies, reviews, meta-analysis. So these 4 are the most common types of articles that are being published by the people commonly in the world. Even I would say 1, 2, and 3 are very common, whereas meta-analyses are not so common yet, because it's not that easy to publish a meta-analysis. This is not to discourage anybody, but you need to do a lot of work in meta-analysis, going beyond the reviews. And then, of course, you can publish theoretical articles, applied or product development related articles, letters or communications, and finally, letters to editors. So in this discussion, I'm not going to talk about these 8 types, but I'm sure the participants here, all the members, all the scientists who are here today have a very good idea about all these types of articles. So the decision is yours, what to publish. Then actually the choice and the type of publication depends on the message that you want to pass to the general public or to the scientific community. In certain instances, you may write a review. You may write a review to enlighten the whole scientific community about the latest trends in something. So the objective is different. And just publishing your research or empirical work that you did with a grant that you have received from somewhere, objective is different. Case studies, again, the objectives are different. For example, COVID-19 pandemic, you can relate that to the agriculture, you can relate that to the education, you can relate that to the economy. So you can have, you can publish that kind of a case study. So objectives are always different, and depending on your objective, you can select whatever the type of article that you want to publish. Then who can publish? I also had this question when I joined the academic staff way back in 1999, just after my graduation, when I was recruited as a temporary staff member to the Department of Crop Science, same place where I am working for now. People started talking about publications, and then I was puzzled. What are these publications, and who can publish? Can I also publish? And I still remember I spoke to some senior members in the department at that time. And yeah, the answer is very straightforward. Of course, university academia, it's one of their prime responsibilities, I must tell you, right? It's one of the prime responsibilities, publications. And then, of course, the researchers of research institutes, there are many research institutes around the country. Tea Research Institute, Rubber Research Institute, Nanotechnology Institute. So likewise, there are so many. So they also publish. And of course, the students in all the universities, the graduate, postgraduate students can publish. They're supposed to publish articles. Other professionals, for example, the doctors, the engineers, the teachers, and whatnot, the nurses, everybody can publish. So even freelance researchers are also there who just publish for fun, just for fun only. They're not planning any upliftment of the status or salary hikes. No, they're just publishing for fun only. So basically, anybody can do research and publish. Anybody can do research and publish. So if there are members who are just recruited to the university very recently, still you can publish. Then why publish? Why? What is the purpose of going for publications? There are many reasons. Of course, you add large amount of information to the body of knowledge. You expand the horizons of scientific knowledge of people. That's one of the major objectives of research. You add to the body of knowledge something. And of course, you will, when you keep on publishing, you will become a recognized expert in your field. You will get to know, okay, this person is a biotechnology specialist, this person is a GIS specialist, and this scientist is a specialist in pathology. So you will get to know about different people based on their publications. And of course, your findings will help develop or improve on existing policies. There are several articles published by some Sri Lankans whose findings led to taking policy decisions in the country. So you can change the country just by your research work. And of course, then you can, your publications will help you advance in your career. You will climb up in the ladder gradually just because of your publications. You add qualifications to your CV. More than everything, you will gain inner satisfaction, because publishing by academic staff members, I always consider that as a social responsibility. It's a very, very big social responsibility. So no one can say, no, I don't want to publish. It's a social responsibility. And through that, you will gain inner satisfaction, thinking that I have done something to the society. So please take the research and publishing work in that spirit as well. When you publish, the first one accepted, the second one accepted, the third one accepted. So you will gain confidence. You will gain confidence about yourself. You can do research when you publish. That means when your work has been accepted by other people, that means you will develop your confidence. That means you can do your research well, you can write well, you can convince people well. So a lot of things are there. Easily you can develop your confidence. On top of all these, actually all these things will be for you, personal benefits. On top of all these things, remember, your institute will benefit. Your institution will be benefited massively, immensely, right? So if you feel like, if you really want to uplift the status of your institute, remember, you have to publish. Whether we like it or not, research publications is one of the major, crucial criteria in the world to judge the quality of an institute. That's one of the major criteria, right? So we can say, okay, our prime objective is to teach the students and so on. It's true. That's our prime objective. And at the same time, research is also a prime objective. Publications come with the research, and don't forget, research is one of the teaching methods, which most of the academic staff members have forgotten. Research is not just for us. Research is for students and research for all of us. So research is just one of the teaching methods. So if you are a really good teacher, you will definitely do research, and you will publish, and you will share all this information with your students, and you will get involved your students in your research, because that's one of the most important teaching methods in the world. Unfortunately, I don't see that in Sri Lankan universities, in many universities in the developing world, using as a teaching method. People do research, but very rarely I see people are using the research as a teaching method in their curriculum. So because of that reason, very recently we have included the research component as because there's another terminology, there's another term used by the people in the world, teaching research nexus, right? Teaching research nexus. That can be a part and parcel of the curriculum in your university. So in my own department, recently we have introduced that. So now from the third year onwards, students start doing research. So we all can do that. Even we can take that back to the first year, because remember, research is one of the teaching methods. So in a nutshell, you will be benefited, you will improve your status, and as a whole, your institute will improve its status quo. Where to publish? This is the next question. There are many opportunities, not like earlier days. Now there are so many opportunities. So now I want you to, let me stop my sharing the screen. And I humbly request all of you to do a small work, take your mobile phone or whatever the device that you are joining through. Okay, give me 1 minute to share my screen once again. Okay, I'm sure you all can see my screen. Please go to www.menti.com. You can just type in your browser. And at the same time, I will share the link in the chat so that everybody can access through the chat as well, right? So there's a link in the chat. When you click on the link, you will be prompted to the same place. There's a link in the chat now. Or else you can just type www.menti.com and use this code 8025827. Those who use the link, they will be prompted directly to this place, and you will see different colored circles. So it's just a matter of dragging that to show your awareness, level of awareness on these different things. Please remember, this is not to check your knowledge or something, but for me to develop the discussion from here onwards. Okay, thank you. Fastest finger members are there. Don't feel, please remember, don't feel bad to say your level of awareness is low for this particular item, because no one is perfect. No one knows everything on this earth. So I can decide based on the outcome of this activity up to what level I need to discuss these things. That's the only reason why I'm having this kind of an activity with you all. There are about 53 or 50 members online. So I received only 18 answers. I would be happy to receive at least 40 minimum. So when you just click on the link that I shared on the chat, so easily you can see this the same window. Okay, shall we complete this in 1 minute time? 25 members have responded. Okay, let's continue because of the time restrictions. If you find any difficulty in getting into this Mentimeter, please let me know. But yeah, that's all right. So already 27 members have responded. Yeah, so the outcome, I'm sure you all can see on my screen now. Google Scholar profile. Yeah, there are many members who are very highly aware about this Google Scholar profile. Okay, average 5.3. H index and I-10 index. Okay, level of awareness is little less. That's okay. Number of citations in Google Scholar. Yeah, average 5. That's fine. Indexed journals, nicely distributed all over. Some members know about it. Some members are not very well aware. Don't worry. Journal impact factor. Yes, again, ups and downs are there. Peer reviewed journals, 4.3. Science citation index, 3.2. And the ResearchGate. Oh, yeah, it's good to see many members know about ResearchGate. So I will focus on the top 7 items. Then, depending on the time available, I will talk about ResearchGate as well. Right. So let me stop sharing my screen. Thank you very much for your support. Let me go back to my presentation. Okay, we were here. And thanks for your output. And based on that, I will develop the discussion. Now, the question we are now facing, or we are now thinking, is the what are the opportunities that we have to publish? Where to publish? What are the opportunities that we have? So there are conferences, there are symposia, and there are journals. I believe you have a very good understanding about the differences between conferences, symposia, and so on. Because I see in Sri Lanka, we use the words without knowing the exact meaning, right? Very simply, you name something and say conference or international conference on something. And some people use the word symposium, international symposium on something. But I always feel like they're using the word without knowing the real meaning. So I'm inviting you all to find the actual meaning of these words and use it. For example, if you're organizing a workshop or a symposium or a conference, you use the word with the proper meaning. Otherwise, it's not really, it's not proper, right? And of course, there are journals for you to publish. Now, conferences and symposia and congresses and many different places, they usually go with a presentation in front of the scientific community, and then maybe they publish the abstract booklet or the full paper. It's a different segment in the research. And the journals usually do not have the presentations, right? But they continuously asking for the publications. They are inviting for publications throughout the year. But the conferences and symposia, usually they are organized within a given time of the year, maybe annually, maybe biannually. So depending on their preferences. And some of the conferences and symposia are linked to journals as well. Not always, but some of the things, some of the conferences and symposia are linked to journals. So again, it's a maybe 2-3 hour discussion, but just to give you an idea, remember all these places are available for us. They are available, there are opportunities, these opportunities are available for all of us to publish our research work. When you think of a journal, or some, and remember, I forgot to tell you one thing. Conferences and symposia usually end up with proceedings. They use a word proceedings. So the proceedings of that particular day or 2 or 3, right? So the word proceedings is usually used for one-time publication on a given date's work. But the word journal is used where you publish continuously, right throughout the year, maybe several issues, even one issue per year. That is also that can also be considered as a journal. A lot of things are there. When you think of journals or publications or proceedings, there are a lot of questions that might come to you. Choice of abstract or full paper, whether to go for an abstract or for full paper. I will come to all these details later. And whether to go for local things or international things. it's very interesting to discuss all these things. So yeah, let's have a separate slide for these things. And then whether to go for online publications or printed publications, or whether to go for open access publications or restricted access publications. And there are many more to decide. There are many more things to consider in publishing. A lot of choices are available. So you can take the choices, you can decide based on your preferences, thinking your promotions and all these things, because some of the things are, I would say, blindly linked with the promotions, which personally I don't like, personally, right? Personally, I don't like that kind of blind linking some of the things to the promotions, particularly in Sri Lanka. So let's discuss one by one. As we said, we can go for abstracts or full papers. You can decide. As you see here, it's an output of a conference, right? It says proceedings of conference. So one university had a conference, and as a result, they of that particular day, this is their output. So they publish the abstract in that case. And not all conferences publish only the abstract. Some conferences publish the full paper as well. So you can decide how and what to do. My personal recommendation, especially for the beginners, right? The beginner researchers or budding academic staff members who were just recruited to the university, please start with abstracts. This is one of the easiest, I don't say easiest, but one of the best ways to develop your confidence, right? Relative to, in relation to when you compare with the full paper articles, publishing an abstract requires less work. I don't say easy, but it requires less work. Unfortunately, in Sri Lankan context and in Indian context, people believe publishing an abstract is easier. You write something and send. I don't know how that kind of thought has been developed over years. For example, whenever I do some work with my students in the university, I pay a lot of attention on writing the abstract part, because abstracting science is at very high level in the cognitive domain. It's at the very top level, very high level. It's a very special skill. Unfortunately, in Sri Lanka, it's the other way. Many people think writing an abstract is nothing. You just type something and you publish. You send to any place, and even the reviewers are not bothered about reading this because it's an abstract. Whenever I get an abstract to review, I pay the same attention that I pay on the full papers. I never consider abstracts as simple things. I know there are some senior academic staff members, even in my age, especially when they become professors, they don't want to review abstracts, thinking that abstracts are at a lower level and full papers are the best, which is really wrong, because abstracting science is a very, very special skill. Only thing is, in Sri Lanka, we don't train people to write abstracts properly. And especially for the young academics, I'm telling you, my humble request is pay your attention full on writing an abstract. It's not writing some statements. You need abstract thinking in your brain. It's a separate function in the brain, abstract thinking, which is one of the most important components in visual and performing arts as well. So don't take any abstract lightly, but I would recommend to start with the abstract first. Then you will develop your confidence. And of course, then you have to go for the full paper articles, right? You have to go for full paper articles because then only the purpose of going for full paper article is that by doing so, you can give all the information to the reader, because in the abstract, you cannot give all the information to the reader. You cannot give, because it's an abstract. It's a summary. Basically, it's a summary, right? and I'm sure you will have a lot of workshops in the future as well. That's no one particular way of writing an abstract. Different journals in the world practice different ways of writing abstracts. For example, some journals say the abstract is just one paragraph. And some journals say, okay, you can go for several paragraphs. And in some journals, you have the different titles in the abstract: introduction or the background, materials and methods, results and discussion. All these things are there in the abstract itself. Some people, for example, we learned at many long years back, you cannot have references in the abstract, but now that also has changed. There are some journals who allow maximum 2 or 3 references in the abstract itself. So now, this is what I want to highlight here. The world of publication is changing all the time. Another good example that I can highlight here is, we learned when we were students or some years back, many years back, to use passive voice in scientific writing. Passive voice. The study was conducted. The data were taken or obtained in that way. But now there are some journals, high-level journals in the world, who specifically say, no way, don't use passive voice. Use active voice in the first person. We want to see who did this work. So now they are promoting to write in this way. For example, we have found, or we have concluded, or we did this, we did that, we hypothesized. So they now recommend to get the responsibility by the authors. Because in the passive voice, nobody knows whose responsibility. But the study was conducted in the University of Peradeniya. No information about who did that, right? The study was conducted maybe by somebody, but I'm writing. So all these things are there, right? So the humble request is to be with the current trends always. The science is changing. The world of publication is changing, right? So you can decide to start with abstract or full papers, but my recommendation for the youngsters is to start with abstracts. Then you will develop your writing skill further. Then the second thing is local or international. This is also a very, very common discussion in Sri Lanka. Again, my personal opinion is different, right? Some people say, oh, don't publish your work in Sri Lanka, go for international publications. And I always have this confusion. What are local publications? What are international publications? Okay, let me give you some examples. The one that you see here is published by the National Floriculture Committee, or I would say a Council for Agriculture Research Policy. Annually, they organize a symposium called Floriculture Research in Sri Lanka, or proceeding a National Symposium on Floriculture Research, NASFLO. Every year, December, this comes, where I'm also a committee member. And the publication, it's a full paper publication and annually published as proceedings. And the people who did floriculture research in Sri Lanka can publish in this symposium, right? The purpose is to share what people have done among the floriculture growers, the policymakers in Sri Lanka. Because there's no purpose of publishing these things in India or in Bangladesh or in Europe or in Bhutan or somewhere without giving this information to Sri Lankan people. So our main focus is to publish in Sri Lanka and to share this information in Sri Lanka. So by any means, we never say this is a local journal or this is of low quality. We never say like that. Because our purpose, our objective is different. Right. Then, of course, there are some journals. Again, I'm sorry, I'm using some other things where I'm involved in. This journal is published by the Postgraduate Institute of Agriculture, University of Peradeniya, where I'm serving as one of the editors-in-chief. And this journal has a wide distribution everywhere in the world. Now we get maybe 2-3 articles per day we receive for the journal from many countries in the world, right? So can we consider this as a local journal now? This has been there in publication for 30 plus years. And can we consider this as a local journal? I know there are some members who consider these type of journals as local journals, but to me, no, they are not. These are not local journals anymore because they are online. Anybody can publish articles here. Anybody can submit articles to this journal. And this journal is referred by many people, many scientists in the world. Not at all a local journal. The floriculture one, the first one on the left corner, it's not online yet, right? It's online, but only within the Sri Lankan communities, because I will tell you there's one category called DOI, Digital Object Identifier. We have not used that for the floriculture journal, floriculture proceedings. But for tropical agriculture research, that digital object identifier is there so that anybody can access the papers from anywhere in the world. Please remember, these are not local journals anymore. So we have to respect. There are many kinds. There are many things like this. I'm sure Univotech is also having a journal at the moment, or maybe journal or two. If not, you can think of starting a journal in the future. There is a very nice service provided by the National Science Foundation called Sri Lanka Journals Online, SLJOL, Sri Lanka Journals Online. When you access that Sri Lanka Journal online website, you will see how many Sri Lankan journals are there, which have a wider distribution all around the world. They are not local journals at all. They are not local. They are international. Unfortunately, people believe the foreign journals are the international journals. For example, this was an article published by one of our research groups this year. This is published by a leading journal in the world, actually new journal, but already it has become very high level journal in the world, published by one of the leading journal publishers, Wiley, in the UK. So are these the international journals? And what about this journal for UK people? Do they consider this journal as a local journal because it's published in the UK? No, it's not. It's an international journal. So this was there some years back, and this consideration, the local international consideration, is, I would say, obsolete, outdated. I personally never use this terminology in categorizing journals. This depends on, if you want to use local or international or whatever, it depends on the objective of that particular journal. For example, as I said, the floriculture, the proceedings, our objective is totally different. And we don't allow a person from Bangladesh to come and publish here, because the objective, the purpose is different here. So this is something for all of you to think. And then online or printed. Is it okay to go for online or printed? Actually, printed journals, where there are still some, I see some proceedings, some symposia, some conferences go for printed journals. But now the world trend is not to print, but to put everything online. So this is something that we also need to think if you are organizing a conference or a symposia, rather than printing, because now the printing press and everything is kind of obsolete, outdated. So go online. And there you see DOI, some number. DOI refers to Digital Object Identifier. Actually, this was an initiative of a not-for-profit organization in collaboration with a company called Crossref. So the whole world of journals now, the publications, they are linked together. So when, and as you see here, the Science Direct, is another publishing company, and they are linked with DOI. DOI is linked with the cross-reference. Cross-reference is linked with the, say, Clarivate Analytics. So all these people are linked together. Only thing is, we think this company is better, this service is better, and so on. Remember, journal publications are now a lucrative business in the world. It's a lucrative business, high money-making business with less efforts. Unfortunately, we have not taken that in that spirit, right? And now I don't say you have to sell your research work and you have to do business and so on. But now, actually, what the world is doing is they have created a market for knowledge. That's what they have done. So it's not, I don't like the word business, but journal business, that's what the people use. But when I say like that, the audience might take it in a different way. So that's why I say there's a market, there's a value for your knowledge. That's what they are doing, other countries. Okay, so when you get this DOI, digital object identifier, this will be linked to many databases, and they will take your information, your research work, and give a lot of publication, even without informing to you. They will do the publication, the publicizing work. Okay, so now the world is moving totally towards online work, forgetting the printed work. Open access or restricted access? This is another question. What is better? Up until recently, many journals went for this business model, charging from the viewer. Right? If I want to read an article, I have to pay to this journal and get. Now the world is moving the other way. If I want my article to be open for everybody, if I'm the author, now I have to pay more. If I want many people to read, I have to pay more and publish. So the author will pay the money for that now. All right, so that's the real open access scenario in the world now. But I know there are some journals, just to do business, they have opened up journals, they started journals, and they say, okay, $20, $30, $50, when you pay that, it will be published online. I don't say what they do is bad, but make sure you will gain something out of it, not just for the promotion, right? For example, you can easily do your research and write the article, and there are some journals where they publish within 2-3 days also, without any review, without giving any criticism, any constructive criticism, they will publish. Don't be happy with that kind of journals. Some people use the word predatory journals, but I have a reservation on that word because that word came up with another story developed by a librarian in the USA, Jeffrey Bale, and now that is also questioned by people. But in Sri Lanka, still we go by the predatory journal lists developed by Jeffrey Bale. And now Jeffrey Bale is not doing anything on this predatory journal list, but someone who's anonymous in the Europe, postdoctoral fellow, is running the list now. So still blindly in Sri Lanka, we are following that predatory journal list. Believe me, some of the journals which were there in the predatory journal list are now very high impact factor journals, very high impact journals, very high quality journals in the world. That story is also very interesting. I'm inviting you all to find more information, because why Jeffrey Bale developed that predatory journal list, and what happened to that, and what went wrong with that list, and so on. Good to know all the time. Right. If I have time today, if I have some more time to discuss further, I will talk about this predatory journal list as well, because good to know all these things. Because sometimes some people will blame you saying, no, don't publish in that because it's a predatory journal and so on. I always question this from many people in Sri Lanka, even in the world, whether can we go with a true predatory journalist? Who is running that? Who has the authority, and so on, right? So now our question is whether open access or restricted access. So if it is a restricted access, you see this purchase PDF. Usually, if from the viewers, from the reader's side, you will have to pay $30 or $40, depending on the journal, but definitely something like 32 or 20 to $50 within that range, right? Roughly. So if that is the situation, Sri Lankans or the developing countries like us cannot access this because we can't pay this money to purchase this. And people realized in the world, this is not supporting the poor countries, poor scientists in the world. So they started some other mechanisms. For example, one not-for-profit organization started this open access concept. So they are now linked with all these different journals, high-level journals, and they publish these open access articles on behalf of the readers. But the authors are charged very highly, sometimes $2,000, believe me, $2,000, $5,000 to publish open access. And then there's another organization developed some years recently, actually, Directory of Open Access Journals. They are helping the developing countries like us. For example, if you have a good journal in your university faculty, and then you can apply for the status, the recognition by the DOAJ. Recently, not recently, 2 years back, I applied for this Directory of Open Access Journal qualification for our journal, and we received it without any trouble, just because of the quality of the journal. So this is what I say, it's not anymore a local journal. It's an international journal accepted or recognized by major publication bodies in the world. Directory of Open Access Journal. So this is in relation to the access to the journal article. And this SciHub website, I'm sure some of you might know this. This is a very nice facility created by a Russian girl, Alexandra Bekian. She has made a website to break all the restricted access journals. For example, if you know the DOI, Digital Object Identifier of a particular article, when you go to the SciHub, you can download that article. Not the most recent ones, right? It takes some time to get into the SciHub website. Not the most recent, but say, if I want to get 2020 article, I would say more than 90% of the articles are available through the SciHub. So it's a very nice thing. Some people blame this. Many journal companies try to sue her, but nothing can be done because what she's doing is, even though some people think it's illegal, but what she's doing is legal. A lot of lawsuits were there, but nobody can sue her. Still, she's actually running this without any trouble, without any problem. Time to time, she changes the domain name. That's the only difference, because otherwise some people can block it, right? Some journals block this site because it really harms their business. So she broke all these taboos, all these business mindset in large journal companies in the world. And she was considered as one of the most influential people in the field of science last year, 2020. Top 10, she was there in the top 10, right? So officially she was recognized. So now my option is always, if possible, go for open access, because the access should be there for your article, for people to read. Then only people will go through and cite your article. There's another question, index or non-indexed? if you have gone to the promotion scheme that we have in the universities, you will find this in the application. Everywhere they are asking 5 articles published in the index journals, or whether your articles are published in the index journals or not. But with my experience, not many people know. This is not to insult anybody. It's the problem of knowledge dissemination among people. So this is why I also try my best to give that information today for you to get to know. This indexing, it's just another service provided by some companies. Just another service provided by some companies. Of course, it's a recognition, giving recognition to your journal or somebody's journal. That's the idea of indexing, right? Nothing else. Maybe you will see some very high quality journals in the indexing services, whereas the same indexing service recognizes some low quality journals as well, right? Still this high quality, low quality, I cannot draw a line. Okay, I cannot draw a line between high quality and low quality, because science is science to me. Science is science. So this is why even the high level or large business journal business companies recognize different quality journals, as people say, different quality journals, right? Okay, so look at this one. These are some of the indexing services available in the world now. Not all, some. So now you see how many people do this indexing work in the world. For example, now there's no argument, Clarivate Analytics is the #1 in the world. #1 company in the world, company for indexing, #1 company in the world. And even Scopus is under them now, right? They have a strong link between that. Scopus is based on the Europe, right? And then there are many things popped up recently. For example, the JGate based in India, EBSCO based on USA, and you see the directory of open access journals, DOAJ, also here. And Google Scholar is one indexing service, free indexing service. And you can see the cross-reference here, and the semantic scholar. There are so many indexing services now. For example, for agriculture-related journals, there are unique indexing services. For example, Agricola, Agros, and there are many, right? Even the CABI International, CABI, okay? So depending on your field, your indexing services could be different. But unfortunately, some scientists in Sri Lanka still talk about Web of Science indexing or Science Citation Index only. I will tell you what that is also, right? So remember, indexing services, indexing means recognition by a particular company, recognition given by a particular company for your journal, not for your article, but for your journal. So you can publish an article in an indexed journal, but for that you have to know where that journal has been indexed. Usually in the front page of the journal, they mention our journal is indexed in this and this and that. Usually all the journals mention that in the home page. Okay, then comes the other scenario, which is the most, I would say, widely used one in Sri Lanka. SCI, Science Citation Index journals. So still we are talking about the choices, whether to go for SCI journals or non-SCI journals. SCI stands for Science Citation Index. And still I see some people use the word Thomson Reuters. Actually, it's again outdated. Thomson Reuters is a large publication company in the world which had this SCI, the Science Citation Index, that service under them until 2016. From this Thomson Reuters, in 2016, the Clarivate Analytics, that company bought the SCI service from them. So now SCI is not anymore under Thomson Reuters. So make sure you don't use the word Thomson Reuters in your research area, not anymore. They're doing publications still, but not related to science, like Science Citation Index. So Clarivate Analytics bought this Science Citation Index service from Thomson Reuters in 2016. And under that, they maintain this as well, Web of Science. Because with my experience, some people still believe Web of Science is something Thomson Reuters, in something SCI, something. Now you see the clear relationship between all these things. There's a chat, how they set these index values. Is there a particular formula? Yes, thank you, Tilina. I will come to that later. Science Citation Index has many different things. They give values, they just recognize the journal under Science Citation Index without giving a value to you. I will tell you what that value is as well, right? So you can ask questions, you can post your questions and everything in the Q&A so that everybody can see, and I'm sure the other panelists also can answer during the session. Okay. So please remember, Web of Science is also a service provided by the Clarivate Analytics to recognize the journals in the world. To recognize the journals in the world. That's one of the services by these indexing companies. All right. Let me move forward. And under this Clarivate Analytics, now they are giving many indices: Science Citation Index, Social Sciences Citation Index, Arts and Humanities, Conference Proceeding Citation. So this is very interesting. For example, there are some conferences in the world which are operating at very high level. A good example is International Society for Horticultural Sciences, where I'm chairing one work groups, and I work very closely with them, operated from the Belgium, and they publish very high level journal called Acta Horticultura. Acta Horticultura. Actually, it's a journal, but at the same time, it's a conference proceedings. It's a conference proceedings, but it's considered as a journal, and it's recognized under Conference Proceeding Citation Index. Okay, and so interesting to see. Not many people in Sri Lanka know about this. They always go by the Science Citation Index. Even all the other application processes, they ask for SCI, SCI, SCI. And now even the SCI is also set aside. Now the Clarivate Analytics is giving you Science Citation Index expanded. And there's another one, Emerging Sources Citation Index, by the Clarivate Analytics itself. Even for books, you can go under Book Citation Index, right? So world is moving so fast. If we try to decide things based on the things that we knew 10, 15 years back, it's really a chaos. So I must be very thankful to your Vice Chancellor, sir, for organizing this kind of a thing. To my knowledge, this is the first of this kind in Sri Lanka, to my knowledge. I have done a lot of training programs in many places in the country, but this kind of a comprehensive topic was given to me only by your Vice Chancellor, sir. So I must be, you all must be very thankful to you for opening up this kind of a discussion for you all, right? So good to know all these things, because especially the youngsters, when you move forward, you should know what is happening and in the world. Surely after 10 years, these things will also change. For example, the company Clarivate Analytics might collapse, bankrupt, and this will be taken up by another company. That's what happened to Thomson Reuters in 2016. They had a big problem. They had a bankrupt, and they sold their science part to Clarivate Analytics. So things are moving. We have to be with the current trends always. So this Clarivate Analytics again maintain another service called Journal Citation Reports, JCR. And they publish this report annually. Every year they publish this report, showing the status of different journals that are under Clarivate Analytics. Okay, so Web of Science and JCR are also related. Web of Science is a continuous process, whereas JCR is one-time report. For example, 2020 JCR report is now available online. Very recently, I attended a workshop conducted by Clarivate Analytics, and I learned a lot from that as well, because they have gone up to another level. Now they are talking, we are still talking about H index and I-10 index and SCI and so on. Now they are talking about new things. I was so surprised to see the new things that I learned, because for them, H index and all these things are now so primitive. Now that, for example, a very nice thing that I learned from the recent workshop from the Clarivate Analytics was journal half-life. I could not believe where they are heading towards. This is what is happening in the science. So we have to be with the trends. To go with, to have a competition with the Clarivate Analytics journal citation reports and the Web of Science and everything, another company started this service. This is called SciMago Journal and Country Rank. This is also very widely accepted. This is run by the USA. Actually, all these Clarivate Analytics, they have partnerships between Europe and India. Okay, this is kind of an attack to that Clarivate Analytics Science Citation Index. So SciMago Journal and Country Rank, if you go to this website, you can find where Sri Lanka is as a country where Sri Lanka is and where your journal is, and so on. Very few journals are still there in SciMago Journal and Country Rank. Not many, very few. So this is something that we all can do. We all should be able to get together and improve the quality of our journal and put in these places, rather than always trying to publish everything in other people's journals and improving their quality. We have to try to improve the status quo of our own journals as well. Okay, and then there are publishing companies. Good to know, because otherwise you will have another confusion. For example, what is Springer? What is Elsevier? What is Wiley? And so on. They are publishing houses. They are big publishing companies. For example, under Elsevier, there are many journals which have been recognized by the Clarivate Analytics. Under Taylor and Francis, there are many books and journals who are under the Science Citation Index or Book Citation Index. Springer is also the same, De Gruyter is also the same, Wiley is also the same. There are so many publishing companies, right? Yeah, there are some raised hands. If you need any question, please. I don't know whether this is the best time. Dilanta, how are we going? Can we have the questions now, or are we going for the Q&A at the end?
The questions at the end, Professor Chalinda.
Yeah, Professor, okay. Then if you wish to let them ask their questions, of course we can, but otherwise we can set it to the end.
Sure.
So shall we make him talk?
Yeah, I'm perfectly right. I would love to. Yeah.
Professor Chalinda, I think you can continue, and we'll open up at the end for questions and answers.
Okay, sir. Okay, sure. Thank you, sir. Right. And then just to give you, show you one of the leading journals in the world from our field. I'm sorry, I'm taking one journal from our own field. This is New Phytology, is one of the best in the world. And you see some numbers here. Impact factor, 10.151, 2020. Last year, impact factor. So there's a number. And then they say 2020 journal citation reports by the Clarivate Analytics, 7th position out of 235 journals in plant sciences. So this is how they market their journal. This New Phytologist, this journal is published by the Wiley. It belongs to the Wiley Publishing House. The journal name is New Phytologist, and that journal has been recognized by the Clarivate Analytics Science Citation Index. And because of its very high quality, it has been recognized with a value. We call it as impact factor, and that's 10.151. It's a very high number, good number. And then JCR, Journal Citation Reports, last year, based on that, this journal has reached the 7th position out of 235 journals in the field of plant sciences. So now you see the links between all these different things. It's a very nice kind of a business model. Each and everyone is benefited. Wiley has a link with New Phytologist. New Phytologist has a link with Clarivate Analytics, and Clarivate Analytics has a link with Science Citation Index, Web of Science, and then JCR. All these people are linked together. And of course, DOI, Digital Object Identifier, is there. And all these things are linked to each other. What is this impact factor? This is a very nice way of calculating the impact or the usage of a particular journal. Actually, the impact factor shows the usage of that particular journal, the usage of the articles published in that particular journal, right? For example, if a particular journal has an impact factor, of, say like 6.125, this is how it is calculated. Citations, right? I'm sure everybody knows citations, but for the beginners, for the youngsters, citations are the kind of usage information of your published article by other people. For example, if I publish an article somewhere in a journal, and in my reference list, if I have one of your articles, you will get one citation. You will get one citation by me. So this means I have recognized your work in my paper. I have recognized your work in my paper. All right. So that's the meaning of the citation. So if you look at 2007 citations for all the articles published in that particular journal, say it's 263. And then 2006, it's 374. So within these 2 years, altogether 637 citations. And number of articles, number of research papers published in 2007 in that journal, particular journal, throughout the year, if it is 55, and in 2006, if it is 49, and altogether within 2 years, it's 104. So when you calculate the 2008 impact factor, you take 2007 and 2006 into consideration. So they call it as 2-year impact factor. They calculate the 5-year impact factor as well, right? 1-year impact factor as well. But the outcome is very similar. So the calculation is very simple. Total citations for the last 2 years divided by the total number of publications, the articles that they are in that journal in those 2 years. So simple. It's a very straightforward calculation. All right. So this is how they have obtained 10.151. It's a very big number. Just to show you how big this number is, in Sri Lanka, the highest impact factor journal, the best impact factor journal that we have for our science field, not for medicine, but for our applied sciences work, is the journal published by the National Science Foundation. The name of the journal is also Journal of National Science Foundation. That has the highest impact factor. As I remember, last year it was 0.4, 0.4. It changes, it varies between 0.2 to 0.4 during years, right? Every year this changes because of the last few years citations. So it's just 0.4. This is not to, insult our own journal. We have to appreciate that because that's the only journal that we have currently in Sri Lanka that has an impact factor in the field of applied sciences. For medical, there are two, but for our work, this is the only one. So we have to appreciate that all the hard work done by National Science Foundation. All right. So you see how big this number is, 10 in this journal. And journals are also competing now. Journals are competing because this is business. They always publish all this information in their main page to show that our journal is performing better and better and better. I actually took this new phytologist journal because the editor-in-chief, Professor Alistair Hetherington, is a very good friend of mine. This is not to boast, but to show how these people help us. Recently, we have appointed Professor Alistair Hetherington as a visiting professor in my own department, and he's helping us a lot. So I'm inviting you all, I'm suggesting you all also to get these kind of people in your faculty, in your university, so that easily we can uplift the status of our science work. Right. So that's about the journal impact factor. And based on all these choices that we discussed so far, you can take a decision whether to go for abstract, full paper, this journal, that journal, SCI, non-SCI, open access, restricted access. You can decide where to publish. The decision is yours. And very quickly, if I go through the process, the paper publication process, you complete your research work, you prepare your manuscript, it takes time. You cannot write an article overnight. Definitely you cannot, right? It takes a lot of time. You need to think a lot for this, and then you submit the manuscript. You decide the journal and you submit the manuscript, your article, to that particular journal. In the world, more than 85% of the journals use manuscript submission software, right? Very few are still using the emails, but 85, and I would say even 90, right? Depending on the journal company, they also show the data. I will show you one company's data, and then the manuscript get reviewed in the sense, some people, some eminent scientists in the same field will go through your research paper to see whether this is of good quality, whether you have done a good work, whether you have written in a nice way, whether there's a message to the general public, to the scientific community. Because hope you remember, we discussed why publish. Under why publish, the first thing was to broaden the horizons of the knowledge, to add to the body of knowledge. So reviewers will look at that. And then based on that, they decide, okay, we can accept it with major revisions, maybe with minor revisions, or unfortunately, they will decide to reject it. Sorry, you need to do these things. Some of the experimental errors are there. Writing was not so good, and all these with reasons, some papers are rejected. I also have the same experience. So don't worry, getting a paper rejected in the reviewing process is not bad at all, because it's a learning process. And you will get a lot of nice ideas by good reviewers. Even in my case, whenever I review an article, what I do is, even if the paper is rejected, I will give you a lot of constructive thoughts for the author to improve that article and to publish somewhere else. That's a very nice thing to do. I also got a lot of very, I would say, harsh criticism, not in a bad way, but in a good way, for some of the articles that I submitted to some journals. And based on those thoughts and ideas, I developed the articles and then published in some other place. So it's a very nice thing. So don't get disheartened if your paper is rejected. It's not bad at all. And then if it is accepted, it will be published. Then the question is, how long will it take? How long will it take? Nobody knows, but the journal will tell you, usually our process will take this much of time, right? Usually the journals state that. 2 weeks, 1 month, and few months, and so on. Earlier, it had gone up to 1 year also, but now there are very few. I don't see there are journals now who take 1 year to process, right? And there are some journals who give the decision within 2 weeks now. Very high quality journals, right? Because they have a separate part saying rapid review part. I'm referring to high quality journals, right? There are some just companies, journal companies, who review in 2 days and say, okay, you have been accepted, and so on. So my humble request here is, if you send an article to publish in a journal, and if they say within 2 days your paper has been accepted, and if you don't see any nice suggestions by the reviewer, you can decide that journal is not at a good quality. All right. So that's something that you need to decide, without saying that's a predatory journal or that and this and that, right? So because there's no improvement for you, don't be happy. If there are no suggestions, don't be happy. You have to be unhappy about that particular journal. Okay. So the reviewing process is also very interesting. There are mainly 3 types, but there are mainly 7 types of reviewing. But the main 3 types are there in the world. One is called single blind peer review. Second one is double blind. And the third one is open peer review. So single blind is the place where the author does not know who the reviewer is. The other ways also there are now in the world, right? Sometimes author suggests, I suggest these reviewers to the journal, but the reviewer does not know who the author is, right? So all different types, different modalities are there. And the most common one in the world is the double blind peer review, where the author doesn't know who the reviewer is and the reviewer doesn't know who the author is. Third type is also now becoming popular, open peer review. Author knows who the reviewer is and the reviewer knows who the author is, and it's done very nicely. I love this third one. I love this third category. For example, whenever I review an article, in some cases I talk to the author directly to get some things clarified, because I have no problem of communicating with them unless there's no restriction in the journal, right? I usually talk to the editors and the authorities of the journal, and then speak to the author, communicate with the author, because that type is becoming very common in the world, going beyond the number 3, that is called collaborative reviewing. I love that type, because I was able to get one of my papers reviewed some 5 years back, actually, by that kind of a reviewer from UK. And I was so happy to see that collaborative reviewing process. So now I try my best to move into that collaborative reviewing type, because if you don't have anything bad here inside, you can go for that collaborative reviewing or open peer review. Now, problem is sometimes you feel like, this paper is from that guy. No, I will definitely reject this. And these things are happening. Okay. And just to give you some statistics, the Wiley, they have 1,593 peer-reviewed journals. Look at this Wiley; they are from they were in operation since 1807, right? And currently they are publishing 1,593 peer-reviewed journals, and out of which 83% of the journals use electronic editorial service, electronic submissions all the time. And when you look at the peer review models, 66% single blind, not double blind, 66% single blind. See, they are changing. And only 34% double blind, and the triple blind type is also there, right? So it's another model where nobody knows what is happening, because when you go through the total electronic systems, you can go for this triple blind system. Otherwise, when you collect the article by the editorial office, it won't be triple blind. Okay, it's a different scenario. And when you look at this, different subjects, different subject areas use different types of reviewing systems. 84% of the social sciences and humanity journals use double-blind review. 95% of health sciences and physical sciences journals use single-blind review. See, and they are experimenting now. 8 journals now offer some form of open peer review. And 4 others offer collaborative review. See where the world is moving? So I'm sure this is the future and we also need to go forward. Just to give you another example here, recently published article by one of my students. And here they started, actually there are many journals like that. They started publishing the name of the reviewer also in the article itself. So the reviewers cannot do very simple Sini Bola type of work. Reviewer has to be very, very firm. See, because reviewer's name appear now in the journal article itself. So you have to do a very good job. So reviewing is not that easy. I personally I'm a good fan of reviewing articles because I learn a lot by reviewing. The whole process, as one of the cartoonists see, this is the researcher and they are the reviewers. Don't think in this way. This is not the reviewing process. Reviewing process is there to uplift our status. Many people think reviewing is something like this, which is not. Reviewers are not bad. They are trying to give suggestions to improve you. And one thing that we all need to do is in Sri Lanka also, we need to improve the reviewing quality, not the writing quality, but the reviewing quality. Because I have seen some people say, even after accepting the paper, they blame the author, saying the paper is of low quality. No, it's not the problem of the author. It's a problem of the reviewer. If the paper is not up to the standard of the journal, the reviewer should have rejected it while giving constructive criticism. So I never blame any author if I see low merit in terms of science in a published article. It's the problem of that particular journal or the reviewers, specifically the reviewers. So based on all these things, either paper will be accepted or paper will be rejected. As I said, don't feel bad even if your paper is rejected, because you will learn from that as well. And just to give you some more things related to, I'm again taking my friend's Google Scholar profile. This is the Google Scholar profile. Everybody can have the Google Scholar profile. As his Google profile shows, number of citations, 15,860. 16. So that means out of all his published articles, 15,816 people have recognized his scientific work. 15,816 people have recognized his work. And he has H index of 60. That means he has at least 60 cited articles, 60, right? At least he has 60 articles that have at least 60 citations. That is the H index. For example, if the H index is 10, that tells that person has 10 articles having at least 10 citations in that. I-10 index shows how many articles that scientist has, minimum of 10 citations. Okay, so his the best cited article has been cited by 1,995 people. 1,995 people. Big number, very big number, right? Okay, so this is the H index. This is how H index is calculated. Then usually you don't have to do it if you have the Google Scholar profile. Google Scholar will calculate it for you, right? So if the paper 1 has 101 citations and so on, if the paper 7 has 8, and if the paper 8 has only 4, so your H index is only 7, because at least 7 citations are there in 7 papers. So if this researcher wants to improve his H index to 8, he has to have some more four citations for the 8th article. Then only his H index will reach 8. Okay. And this was a very nice article published by the Nature in 2014. According to their findings, they say, if we print only the first page of all the papers published in Web of Science, then when you compile all these things, when you pile up all together, it will reach the height of the Kilimanjaro. It will reach the height of the Mount Kilimanjaro. And only few papers have good citations. Others have no citations at all. So this is what they have come up with. There are 25 million articles without any citation. Honestly, I also have some of my articles. Still, no one has cited. It's true. And then there are some 1 to 9 citations, 18 million articles. Some of my articles are there in that group. And 10 to 99, 13 million. Some of my articles are there in that group. And 100 to 999, only 1 million articles in the world, whole world. Still, no, for me, no, not yet. And you see, Professor Alistair Hetherington has articles even under this category, 14,000. So this is what we all need to do. We'll do something that can be recognized by the other people. Most of the highly cited articles in the world are related to biological lab techniques. So whenever people use that technique, they will cite. Technique, cite. That's why they have received this much of citations. And I'm sure you are familiar with Duncan's multiple range test. Everybody uses after doing ANOVAs. And it has been cited only 35,000 yet. So unfortunate, everyone is using Duncan multiple range test, but without giving the credit to this person. That is why this less number. The breakthrough of Watson and Crick in 1953 in finding the DNA structure has received only 15,000 citations up to now. Everyone is talking about DNA, but without citing. So these things are also there in the science. So we can publish, or you can decide publish or perish. There's no purpose of doing research if you don't publish. There's no purpose. Don't do research if you don't publish. That's the last suggestion for you all. And most of the research, sometimes you will not be able to do it for your interest. At the beginning, at the bachelor's level, you can decide, okay, I'm going to do research whatever I want. And when you do your master's or PhD, no, you have to do research whatever your professor wants. And then when you become an assistant professor or a lecturer probationary, you have to find grants. So there are granting agencies. They specifically say, we give grants only for these research areas. So you have to abide by their commands. And then when you become a professor, luckily we don't have this tenure track in Sri Lanka. When you become a professor, you're a professor continuously. And even for them, we have to take the conditions by the grant committees. And when you are retired, you feel like, I can do anything. I'm going to do anything. And as this cartoonist show, RIP, research in peace. So you can publish even articles with the thanks, thank you, right? Giving thanks, the relational context of gratitude, and say thank you, some pragmatic constraints in conversational closing. So there are people who have submitted articles, published articles on that line as well. So with that, let me thank all of you for being with me for these 1.5 hours. And let me hand over the session back to the organizers.
So thank you very much, Professor, for your wonderful and excited lecture. And I think all the budding researchers who are gathering here in this workshop, may acquired many things and extracted many inspirations from your lecture, because as a whole, I have to say that the thing I have extracted from your lecture, sir, especially if someone have courage and enthusiasm, and especially the open mind, of course you can do something, research, and the whole world open to you, only ourselves closing our doors and windows to the world. That's why that's the thing I acquired from your lecture. Thank you very much. And Professor Chalinda Benaragama, uh, uh, again and again, for accepting our invitation in this regard, and conducting a very nice lecture for the budding researchers who gathered here. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So I think if someone have any questions, this is time to raise. And Professor Chalinda, if you could wait another 5-10 minutes for them. Attendees?
I have a couple of comments.
Yes, sir.
Chalinda, and thank you very much, Professor Chalinda. Very interesting presentation. I really enjoyed listening to you, and I also learned a lot from this presentation. A couple of things I think for the benefit of the audience, if you can explain the difference between, although you mentioned this, you have not, you didn't go into elaborating it, abstracts and extended abstracts. You mentioned the attributes, but you did not specify the basic difference, whether it can go standalone or whether it be accompanied by the full paper. And the second point I want to, it's not a comment, I'm not expecting a comment from you, but we are preparing a whitelist for the journals, because it's very difficult to blacklist or put into a gray list for predatory journals. So what we decided was to develop a whitelist, and these are the journals that are accepted. So we can add, we can update it regularly, but these are the accepted journals. And third one, the point I want to ask you a small comment on the DOI. How do you get a DOI for your journal, and how can you get it registered? And then, you know, it open up for other people to look at it easily. So with this comment, I again thank you, and thank you for the organizing committee for organizing a very interesting session. And I hope we have 2 more productive sessions ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Let me quickly answer the first question, the abstracts and extended abstracts. Actually, in the world of publication now, currently, the extended abstract concept or the short communication concept is kind of outdated. There are very few journals who accept extended abstracts or short communications. Short communications in the sense that we feel in Sri Lanka, because in Sri Lanka, I have seen if the paper is not at a very good standard, then they go for, they recommend for a short communication. But in the actual world, the short communications are there to publish your research well in advance before you submit the final actual full-length article. So that's the whole, the original idea of short communications. But we are, to my knowledge, we are using it in a different way. The extended abstract, in most of the cases, when you submit the abstract, you have to submit the extended abstract also to support the reviewer, to get more idea, more information for the reviewer, because within the abstract, sometimes it's very difficult to judge what the authors have done, especially when the word limit is something like 200. There are some journals who specifically say maximum is 200. So very difficult to judge the work just by the abstract. So in that case, if the abstract is only reviewed you have to submit the extended abstract as well. But there are very, very few instances in the world where extended abstracts are published. The third one, DOI. In Sri Lanka, there's an official body to get the DOI. That's the National Science Foundation. So if you have, for example, if you have a journal, or if you want to have DOI for a book, you can write to National Science Foundation. There's one Miss Amila Tennakon. She's the one who's handling. She's doing an excellent work there. She's the one who's handling these things. So they have the official license to get the DOI. Even if not, we can write directly to cross-ref, and we can get the DOI as well. It's a very simple thing. And together with that, there's another service. I forgot to mention that at the discussion. It's the Creative Commons license. It's another licensing service which is commonly being used by the world now to get the intellectual property rights. So that is also a very simple thing to do. Directly, very straightforward. You can write to the Creative Commons, and you can use their licensing services for free. There are 6 types. You can select which one matches with you better. Thank you, sir.
Okay, Professor, on behalf of the attendees, you can see some questions put in the chat box.
Any questions, I see.
Yes, sir.
Do we have time to go into questions? Is it okay?
Yeah, if those are so specific, we can give you another 5 minutes.
One thing, there's one question. What are the methods to increase citations? Is there real impact from research grants and other similar, ResearchGate, RG, and other similar platforms? Yes, you can, don't try to increase your citations, but try to publish an impactful research work and publicize it. ResearchGate is one of the platforms to publicize your work easily. So when more people see your work, there's a tendency of more people citing your work as well, right? So that's something that I can tell you about the citations. But personally, I believe we should not try to get more citations. If the work is good, definitely you get. Let me share a very, very nice example. I have published 2 articles among the several articles published in 2010. I take 2 examples always. One article was published in a very high impact factor. The impact factor is 10.4 in that journal. It's Aging Research Review. The journal name is Aging Research Review. And I was so happy when I published an article in a journal with 10.4 impact factor, very high level journal. And I received the presidential awards for that. And I was so happy. But believe me, on the same year, I published another article in my PGIA journal, Tropical Agricultural Research, just from my PhD work, published another article there. To date, believe me, the one that I published in that 10.4 impact factor journal has received only 20 citations, 21 citations, whereas the one that I published in Tropical Agriculture Research in Sri Lanka in our PGIA journal has already received 65 citations. So I have a question, which has more impact? It's the journal, it's the article, or what? Because then I went through all the cited people. All 63 cited people, not a single person from Sri Lanka. All are from different countries and all are from very high impact factor journals. So this is to say, if it's not really the journal that matters for your citations, but of course, wide visibility should be there. But at the same time, your work also is important. There's another question. Is there any limitation of pages for extended abstract and full papers? Extended abstract, I'm sorry, there's no international recognition for extended abstract. Once again, I have to tell you, because people consider those as also full papers now. And journals, there are journals who limit starting from 5. That's the minimum that I have seen, from 5 up to 20, right? And then they specifically say, if you want to go beyond that, you have to pay more. for each and every single page, you have to pay more. So that's the kind of modality that they are using. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Professor Chandana Benaragama, and please accept our heartfelt gratitude upon your contribution on behalf of the Vice Chancellor of the University and the organizing team. So thank you very much.
I must also thank Vice Chancellor sir once again for inviting me and for organizing this kind of workshop for the youngsters, for the benefit of the youngsters. Thank you very much for all the organizers. Thank you.
Okay, attendees and the panelists, now we are going to change to the second session of the workshop. Please let me introduce the resource person, Dr. Roshani Palliyaguru. Madam, are you there? Then please switch on your video. Then we can introduce yourself to the attendees.
Hello, Dilantha.
Dr. Roshani, right. Very happy to see you, madam. Then attendees, I'm going to introduce the next resource person of the day, Dr. Roshani Palliyaguru. She is going to conduct a session on the topic, what constitutes scholarly contribution? Dr. Roshani Palliyaguru currently working as a senior lecturer in the University of Vocational Technology under the Department of Quantity Surveying. Also, she bearing the position of head of the department, and she was a lecturer in construction management at Deakin University, and also worked as assistant professor in quantity surveying at Harriet University, and also lecturer in quantity surveying at University of Salford, lecturer at the Department of Building Economics, University of Moratuwa. So when I'm going through her academic qualification, she acquired her Doctor of Philosophy qualification in Infrastructure Development and Environmental Concern in Disaster Management at University of Salford, United Kingdom. Bachelor of Science Honours in Quantity Surveying, First Class Honours at University of Moratuwa, Sri Lanka, and as a researcher, she has published nearly 50 research papers in high-impact journals and international research conferences. So, madam, I am going to cordially invite you to conduct the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the introduction, Mr. Dilantha. It's a great pleasure to be part of this important workshop on publishing research. Herewith, I would like to thank all the organizers for organizing this kind of a useful workshop for our academics and the researchers. Once again, very good morning to all the participants who have joined this session from very many different places. And also, I would like to extend my sincere welcome to all the participants to session number 2, which is titled, What Constitutes Scholarly Contributions? Scholarly means something that involves serious academic study. We can think of the term scholarly as an umbrella term for several different kinds of authoritative, credible, reliable sources. When we think of different types of scholarly sources, the first thing comes to our mind is peer-reviewed journals. The primary objective of peer-reviewed journals is actually to provide a platform for expert researchers to publish their research-based findings. On the other hand, we have trade or professional magazines, journals as well. They are also counted as scholarly contributions, but these things are not very much limited to research. In such kind of professional magazines, you can publish various news from various industries, best practices from various industries, as well as various tips, good practices from the practitioners, and so on. And also, most of the time, these industry-based journals or industry-based magazines are not peer-reviewed most of the time. Further to that, other sources such as books, various government publications, those things can also be considered as scholarly contributions. Anyway, here in this session, we are going to mainly focus on research-based publications. That is because research-based publications are the ones that we are interested in. Accordingly, let's see what research means. Research means searching. In other words, intensively searching for something again and again. Right? Especially when you do not know the exact answer for something. So as you can see here in this slide, research can be defined as a systematic investigation into a problem or situation where the intention is to identify new facts or confirmation of existing facts that will assist in solving problems or dealing with situations. Albert Einstein once said that if we knew what it was we were doing, it wouldn't be called research. In other words, for something to be called research, we must be carrying out an incentive search for something that we don't know the exact answer or solution for that particular thing. So this is how research has been perceived by many philosophers, scientists, physicists, and so on. As we all know, research is a process. It's not a static thing. It's not a one-time thing. It's not a one-off thing. And it doesn't have an end by itself. When you carry out a particular research, probably you might think, yes, I have come to an end of my research by deriving conclusions. But that is not the thing. When you carry out a research, it ends up with creating more problems than what you actually managed to solve. Therefore, we can define research as a cyclical process. Anyway, as far as a single research is concerned, a single research involves a step-by-step process, starting from selection of an interesting area for research. For expert researchers, they have already established their research areas. But for beginner researchers, they have to do some homework, a lot of homework basically, to identify a worthy and interesting area for their research. Once they carefully identify an area for research within their discipline, with regard to a given research, what they need to do first is they have to carry out a proper literature search to find out a useful or important research gap. When you identify an important research gap, that will help you to define an aim and set of objectives for your research. Moving on from there, you have to carry out a detailed literature review in order to address your aim and objectives of a research. Thereafter, you have to come up with a proper methodological methodology for your research. How are you going to carry out your research? What are the means and ways of collecting empirical data? Likewise, there must be a clear research methodological design must be there. Then you move on to the empirical data collection stage. Once you collect the empirical data, then you start analyzing your data using appropriate analytical methods. Then you come to the stage of deriving findings. You come up with results after you analyze your data, and then you discuss those results and derive conclusions based on that. Some people might think, okay, now this is the end of my research. But that is not the end of your research, because you must always try to move or step into the next stage of publishing as well. Why do we publish? As Professor Benaragama was explaining, there are very many purposes of doing publications. Mainly, when you do a proper publication, you get the opportunity to disseminate your new knowledge, the newly created knowledge, to the rest of the world, to the other researchers,
So, attendees, I have an announcement. Just give us 5 minutes to settle the problem, because our resource person facing some kind of a technical issue. Then it will be solved within 5 minutes. Just give us 5 minutes. Right. We will be back. Very sorry about the inconvenience caused.
Mr. Jayalath,
Sir?
until Dr. Dilini is ready with the presentation after resolving the technical issues, since we have a large group of attendees,
Yeah.
I think we can think of going for the discussion.
Yeah,
that now in the earlier presentation, we look at the issue of the need for publishing. Why do we need to publish? And so Professor Benaragama mentioned a few points. And also, I think in this context, as scientists, we learn from what other scientists developed so far. So we have been learning the science introduced, developed by other scientists. Now, if you want me to be included in the scientific community, one can ask the question, what is your contribution for science? What have you done for science? Now, if I tell that, well, I have learned science from what others published, I may not have an answer for the question, what have you contributed? Now, when I look back in my career, if I've borrowed things, if I've taken things from others and not given anything back, I am a debtor. I am in debt. As a scientist, you are very poor if you are in debt. So what is important, even in the normal world, you borrow money, get credit, and then settle it, and then invest. Likewise, as a scientist also, in the scientific domain, it is important for us to learn from others, see what others have done, see what others have contributed, and then also see how my work can contribute to science. That's very important. How my research work could contribute to the furtherance of science. And if I don't have a sufficient set of attributes to be forwarded to answer that question, I think as a scientist, we are short of our duty. If Dr. Roshani is ready, with the presentation, I can shorten the discussion. Otherwise, I can continue for a while because the audience need.
Sir, this is Professor Chandana speaking. I request you to continue the discussion till for some time.
Sorry?
I request you to continue the discussion till for some time.
Right. Okay. So if you look at the your contribution, it's important. Like, you need to gather things. And as a scientist, when you are a budding scientist, you learn from others, you take the inputs from others, you see how other people have done, you see how other people help for the furtherance of science. And then once you become a fully fledged scientist, your recognition depends on how much you have contributed to science. And that is what we are trying to achieve through publication. Publication is not the only means through which you can contribute to science. And science, I think it's the word science is a way of understanding of the complexities of the nature. So we try through scientific approaches, through scientific methodologies, we are trying to explore and understand how things work, and the nature itself change, and nothing in this world is static. Everything in this world is changing, and so we need to develop our approaches in science also to suit these changes in science. So in the publication domain also, we need to expand our capacity, updating our knowledge on publication, seeing how the world, which direction the entire world is moving. We also need to join that journey with them. So that is why we need to have this kind of research. I think Roshani is ready.
Dr. Roshani is now ready to continue.
Right. Okay. Right. Thank you very much. I just thoughts for you to compile your views regarding this workshop. Thank you.
I'm extremely sorry for the interruption. There was a technical issue. Let me continue on from where I stopped. So I was actually describing the importance of stepping to the stage of publishing your research, right? It's really important, as Professor Benaragama was explaining. There are various reasons, actually, mainly to disseminate your new knowledge to the rest of the world, including other researchers in the world in your same discipline, as well as to the general public as well. Right. So in this process of publishing your research findings, there are various important things that you need to be aware of. Therefore, from here onwards, I'm going to talk about publishing research. How to get your research published. Accordingly, this presentation, this particular session has been structured across these sections that I have listed here on this slide. I already explained what research means and what do we mean by the research process. And hereinafter, I'm going to talk about the purpose of a research manuscript, but I'm not going to explain that in detail because Professor Benaragama was explaining that in very detail. It was a really interesting presentation. Therefore, I'm going to talk about what constitutes quality of a research manuscript, and what are the main contents and the structure of a research manuscript, and how do we need to compose, what do we need to know when we compose different sections of a research manuscript. And especially I'm going to talk a little bit about actually the use of referencing material. What do we mean by plagiarism, and how do we need to do paraphrasing, and the importance of referencing. I'm going to spend a couple of minutes on that as well. And finally, to talk a little bit about planning of your research as well as your manuscript and the writing process, and some important tips for improving your quality of writing. This is what I'm going to talk throughout this presentation. As far as the purpose of a research manuscript is concerned, the main purpose is actually to disseminate your new knowledge to other researchers in the field, as well as to ensure how well your research fit in with the current knowledge base created by other researchers in the field. Your contemporary researchers, as well as the current researchers, as well as maybe the future researchers. And on the other hand, one of the other purposes of publishing research is actually to disseminate your findings to the general public, because the general public is also interested. For example, people are interested in research on, let's say, medical sciences. They want to know what are the medical equipment, or maybe the medical the research findings are available in the world to cure a particular disease. It's like that. So other than that, there are various other purposes of conducting research as well as publishing research. I'm not going to talk about them in detail here. It may be part of your job requirement as well.
you as an academic or a researcher, your institute might specifically ask you to engage in research publication, especially in overseas countries. Actually, this is there's a significant requirement for you to survive as an academic. You must actually carry on with publication. So I'm going to talk about this publication process, especially what do you need to do when you compile a research manuscript. Therefore, I'm especially going to focus on publishing journal manuscripts, and also this might include conferences or symposium articles as well, but my main focus here is actually compiling a full journal publication, research-based journal publication. When you talk about research-based journal publications, there's another important thing. It's a very important thing we have to think of is actually the quality, ensuring the quality of a research manuscript. When you talk about the quality factor, there are several parameters involved in defining the quality of a manuscript. Firstly, the relevance. Relevance here in the sense, when you compose a research manuscript, you have to be very concerned about keeping the focus, because you have done your research in order to address a particular research problem or a particular research aim with a set of objectives. So there's a clear focus. So you must be able to maintain this focus throughout your research manuscript. And also, your research manuscript must be relevant to the aim and scope of the journal where you are planning to publish your article. So when you select a journal, you must be really careful about making sure the scope of your article matches with the aim and the scope of that particular journal. And also, you must make sure that you limit the scope of your article. The reason is actually when you conduct a research, your scope might be a little bigger. But when it comes to the publication stage, you may not be able to publish the entire research, the entire scope covered within a particular research by doing a single journal or a single conference article. Probably you might need to divide or break your entire research into several articles and think of publishing several articles. Therefore, sometimes again another thing is when you look at the journal requirements, especially the guidelines for authors also, you may need to narrowing down the scope of your research into a lesser scope, because you need to adhere to the author's guidelines as given in specific journal. So you must conform to the specified length by your selected journal as well. So this is how we define the relevance of a research manuscript as far as publication settings are concerned. Secondly, organization of a manuscript. What does it mean? It means that your research manuscript must be a logical thing. It must be structured in an appropriate manner to cover all the required information. Sometimes you may have to stick to the guidelines given by the journal when you decide the specific structure, or else there are generic structures as well. I'm going to talk about the generic structure involved in journal research manuscripts in a minute. So this organization is one of the key things, and also putting the right information at the right place. In other words, putting the right information in the right sections within a manuscript is also another thing that defines the quality of a research manuscript. The next thing is coherency. Here the coherency means including the necessary information basically, because throughout a research manuscript there must be a consistency, clear consistency. From when you move on from one section to another, there must be a clear flow, and this coherency must be maintained throughout your research manuscript. When you have a clear focus, it will make your life easy in maintaining the coherency of a research manuscript as well. And also, you do not need to include all the information. That's what I said. You may have to limit your scope depending on the aim and the scope of the particular journal that you are trying to submit your publications, trying to submit your manuscript. According to that also, you may have to limit your scope. Therefore, remember that you do not need to include all the information, but as those fit to the scope of your manuscript. Then the clarity. Again, clarity is another really important thing because it deals with the aspects like the use of right grammar, correct grammar, proper writing style, using proper phrases, terminology. This is really important. Your manuscript may be scientifically very rigorous, but still the use of grammar or maybe the phrases you have used or the writing style may not be appropriate. Accordingly, your research manuscript will not reach the targeted audience. Therefore, you have to be really careful about the formatting guidelines. You must read the formatting and the style guidelines provided by your journal, whatever your targeted journal, and then adhere to that very carefully. The next most important thing when we define the quality of a research manuscript is originality. When you start off your research with a clear research gap, because you do not need to repeat a research done by somebody else. There are instances that you may have to do research for the confirmation of, in order to confirm the research findings of another researcher or previous researcher. There may be a need. If you have a need, okay, then that is also can be considered as original research. But on the other hand, for a research to be considered as an original research, you must make sure that you are creating new knowledge. You are creating new knowledge with reference to a particular research gap. And also your research must be able to contribute for further advancements in your subject area. If your research fulfills these requirements, then we can call it an original research. And also scientific rigor and validity. It's really important. Scientific rigorousness mainly, it defines or it deals with the strict application of scientifically robust research methodology. When you say research methodology, it includes various data collection methods as well as data analysis methods. So these methods, whatever the methods you are going to adopt for your research, must be scientifically rigorous. There must be high rigorousness in these methodologies. And also throughout the research manuscript, you should be able to explain the procedures you have adopted in very detail, right? So throughout your research manuscript, there must be a thoughtful and a comprehensive study demonstrated. Your study must be a thoughtful one, carefully planned one, and a comprehensive one that is useful for the other researchers in the same discipline or maybe to the generic public as a whole. And also you must make sure that you present your study as a finished piece of work. It doesn't mean that you have to include every little information within your manuscript, but you can actually suggest future research directions as well. But your entire manuscript as a whole must be a finished piece of work. Otherwise, your reviewers, journal reviewers will definitely make suggestions, or sometimes they might straight away reject your paper as well, your manuscript as well. Therefore, you must be really careful to make sure that your research paper is a scientifically rigorous as well as a valid research. So all these factors together will define the quality of a research manuscript. So that is about the quality factor. So let's talk about the type of information we are supposed to include within a research manuscript. Within a research manuscript, we have to talk about what was actually done, why that particular research was conducted, that means the research need and the research gap, where the need is and why this research was conducted, and how this research was conducted. That means the methodological part of your research. And then you have to present results, and then you have to interpret, which means you have to discuss your results, and finally you have to produce conclusions for your results. This is the generic, the general contents included in a research manuscript. If you look at the contents, the structure of a manuscript in detail, the entire body of a manuscript can be divided into 3 segments as introduction section, body of a manuscript, and conclusion sections. Within each one of these sections, there are various components involved. So here is a comprehensive list of components usually involved in a research-based publication. I'm not talking about abstracts or extended abstracts or case studies specifically. I'm particularly referring to full research-based publication. Here, as you can see here in the list, firstly, you need to have a title for your article. Then you have to name the authors along with their institutional affiliations, information about those, their institutions and all. And there must be an abstract. There must be a set of keywords. There must be an introduction. literature review, research methods and materials section on that, and resource and discussion. In some manuscripts, actually, they encourage combining these two sections, resource and the discussion section together. Some journals might encourage you to go for two different sections on resource and discussion. So I'm going to talk about them in detail in a minute. And then you have to have a conclusion section, which is really important. And finally, a list of references. So I'm going to talk about the essential aspects involved in each and every one of these sections in detail throughout the rest of the presentation. We'll begin with the title of manuscript. Title is a really important thing. That is sort of like an entryway to the contents of your manuscript. A title can encourage other people to read, select your article as an important one for them to include in your research, for them to read further. Therefore, it is really important that you go for an accurate title which can precisely define the contents in your article. When you go for a really interesting, accurate, precise and informative, sort of like a descriptive title, that will improve your chances of being cited, because then the readers will choose your article, because as we all know, readers do not want to read every article. They want to limit their reading. So in a context like that, we must make sure that our title can attract the audience. Accordingly, there are certain characteristics that we are really keen about when defining a title for a manuscript. The title must be unambiguous. It must be specific, in other words. So here I have given an example. A title like this one, the evolution of sustainable development concepts in Sri Lanka. It's a sort of a very ambiguous, broad, vague title, because it doesn't say, when you say sustainable development, it doesn't say in which industry, in which context, during which period. It doesn't say anything. Therefore, it's a vague title. But if you want to make it specific and go for a title like this, the evolution of sustainable development concepts in the construction industry of Sri Lanka during the post-war period. So it's very specific. Therefore, a title of a manuscript must be very specific and it must be unambiguous. And you should avoid using slash and puns, because sometimes you may find them interesting, but they are not actually. And also, your title should not be long. It must be short and simple as possible. And your title must be accurate, and it must be able to attract. It must be catchy actually, must be able to attract your audience, and it must be complete as well, and should be able to give a descriptive overview of the contents of your research. If you can go for a title like that, you will be able to attract a better audience for your manuscript, because the titles are used by abstracting and indexing services as well. Secondly, when we talk about the authors who are to be included as authors in a research manuscript, those who actually made an intellectual contribution towards a particular research, they are the people to be included as authors in a research manuscript. And those authors should be able to take responsibility for the data, for the information, for analysis, for interpretations, for conclusions, everything presented in a manuscript. Those who can take responsibility, they are the people to be included as authors within a manuscript. And also, the order of the authors are concerned, that can be decided by the team of the researchers, those who are involved in a particular research, and also that may be decided by the institution as well as maybe by specific disciplines as well. And also another thing we must know is the first author doesn't necessarily need to be the corresponding author always. The corresponding author can be somebody else as well. It depends. Okay, the third most important thing here is abstract. We'll talk about abstract a bit later, because although it appears at the very beginning of a research manuscript, this is the last thing that we attend when we compose a research manuscript. Therefore, we'll talk about the abstract a bit later. The next thing is keyword. Usually, almost all the journals request for a list of keywords. The keywords are the important words, or the words that frequently appear within your manuscript. right? So you have to be really careful when you select keywords, because the keywords should be able to capture your research. Together with the title, keywords can play a significant role in improving your citations as well as catching your audience. Therefore, you must be really careful about improving your chances, the chances of your article being cited, being referred by readers by choosing right keywords. And also, as you know, during the online submission process of journal articles, they normally ask for subject classifications as well. For the subject classification, the authors can use their keywords, right? When the subject classification aligns with the keywords, it makes the editor's life easier as well, because they can then easily find reviewers to review your paper. Okay, then we'll move on to another important section within your research manuscript called introduction. Here, introduction means we should know what is normally included within an introductory section. Within an introductory section, there must be a brief introduction to the context and the background of your research problem, because you conduct research with reference to or targeting at a particular research problem. Therefore, you must provide the contextual information why your research actually led to select that particular research problem. That has to be clearly explained. Thereafter, you have to explain your research problem, and then you have to move on to explain the real research need, why that particular research is actually needed, the research gap, and it's a kind of a justification for conducting that particular research. And also within the introduction section, you must explain, you must clearly mention the aim of your research and the research objectives, scope and any limitations involved in your research, as well as a summary of research methods. Just a summary, right? Here, this is not the place for you to include or list down your research findings. No, this is not the place for that. Just a brief summary of research methods adopted along with an overview for the rest of the paper. This is what you need to exactly include within the introduction section of a research manuscript. So as you can see here, introduction section also takes a sort of a funnel approach, because you start broadly by referring to the contextual or the background information related to your research, and then you narrowly progress or narrowly go down to the level of presenting your research objectives, right? Starting from a very broad level with contextual information, and down here you move on to introducing the research objectives of your research. As we refer to two important things called aim and research objectives, right? Let me talk a little bit about these two things as well, right? Again, it depends on your discipline as well as certain practices in your discipline, because some people may not go with a particular aim. They might call it a hypothesis, or they might call it a research questions, or they might use the word a generic objective as well. So it depends. But in my discipline, we usually go with the terminology research aim. Aim is sort of it's a broad thing, slightly broader thing compared to research objectives. It's a broad thing. So it's a sort of an overarching statement that introduces the intention or the purpose of a research article. Here I have given an example for an aim: to develop a design tool that can support the construction industry in developing circular building components. It's clear. It's a clear aim, because we know, okay, the intention is actually to develop a develop a design tool. Therefore, the aim is clear. And another thing we must remember is aim and objectives are two different things. Therefore, they must be treated separately. Right? So, a clear aim can then gradually lead to a set of objectives, because just with an aim, right, it doesn't give you a clear step-by-step process to be followed to achieve the aim. So in order for somebody to achieve an aim, there must be a clear set of objectives. Normally, the objectives are stated in the last paragraph of the introduction section. Objectives must be clearly stated. You may have 2 to 3 or up to 5 objectives even, but within a single manuscript, there must be a limitation. So you might go up to 3 objectives to be covered within a single manuscript. So these objectives are specific statements. They are quite more specific than the aim, because they gives you the direction for your research. In other words, a step-by-step approach to be followed to achieve the aim. So here, normally we say your objectives must be SMART, which means your objectives must be specific, right? They shouldn't be vague, right? And they must be measurable. In the sense, you should be able to measure whether you have achieved your objectives or not. There must be, therefore, there must be some kind of a measurability in your objectives, and also agreed upon. Agreed upon here in the sense, the researchers, just suppose a research that involves several researchers, right? So when you define objectives, these objectives must be agreed upon by all the team members of a research team. And also sometimes we call it achievable as well, which means within the given limitations, whatever the limitations in front of you, you should be able to achieve your objectives. Right? That is also sometimes we define it that way as well. And also your objectives must be relevant. Relevant in the sense, because you do a research targeting a particular research problem based on which you develop an aim. So your objectives must be relevant to achieve that particular aim and the research problem. And also your objectives must be time-based. In other words, you should be able to achieve your objectives within the given time frame. Here I have given some bad examples for research objectives. So as you can see here, if you just say to reduce cost of construction, if you just state it as a research objective, it's very vague, it's not specific. You don't know whether we can measure that or not. Once you achieve, we don't exactly know whether we have achieved that objectives, because we don't exactly say reduce cost of construction by how much. By when? Nothing is given. Therefore, these kind of objectives, we call them normally bad objectives because they are not SMART. Okay, so moving on from there, as a summary, what I can say is the introductory section of a research manuscript must be brief, must be descriptive, must be coherent, logical, and finally it should be able to stimulate the readers and put them in a receptive mood. Encourage them to read your article as much as possible. Then let me move on to the other important section of a research manuscript. We call it literature review. Literature review normally serves two purposes. A literature review can establish a research gap as well as it can set the boundary of your research. So here I have identified several things when we talk about research gap. What does it mean actually? So when we conduct a research, we should have a research gap. So initial literature review help you to figure out a research gap. What is actually missing in the existing knowledge base, the current knowledge base? What are the conflicting evidences produced by different authors? Therefore, you need some further research to confirm or validate or maybe come up with a different set of findings. And also, during the initial literature review, it will help you when you come up with a research gap by reading literature. It will help you to demonstrate that your research is original and innovative. There's a clear use that your research is very worthy because it's original and it's innovative. So that is what we mean by establishing a research gap. And also a literature review help you define the boundary of a research as well, because it is through a detailed literature review that you set up the intellectual context for your research. By reviewing literature, the existing knowledge base, you can actually assess the quality of the present state of knowledge, right? And you can you get to know about the existing theories, the existing the concepts, everything, and also the patterns. You can, by reading a lot of literature, you can develop the major patterns in literature and so on. So in other words, doing a detailed literature review will help you demonstrate that you have been informed by the existing or the current knowledge base. Therefore, a literature review help you to set the boundary of your research as well. Moving on from there, we'll talk a little bit about the section called research methods and materials. Having a separate section for research methods is really important. The purpose of having a separate section for research method is to demonstrate that you have used the right research methods, the correct ones, the most suitable or the most appropriate research methods, and also to demonstrate the fact that you are aware of various different types of suitable research methods. For a given research, there may be several appropriate or suitable research methods, but out of those suitable ones, you must be able to select the most appropriate the research methods, data collection methods, data analysis methods, and so on. Therefore, the purpose of a separate section for research methods is to provide the justification for selection of your research methods as well. Within the research method section, what to be included? Right? This section is really important because this is one of the main sections that defines the scientific rigorousness of a research. Therefore, you must write this section in such a manner that the entire the set of the measures are replicable by another researcher. If somebody else also interested in repeating the same research and confirm whether your findings are correct, right? Something like that. Your research should be able to be repeated by another research as well. Therefore, your research methodology section must be written in a very detailed manner, clearly explaining all the procedures followed throughout the research methodology. Types of data collected, how many, if you have adopted a method like observations, the frequencies of observations in experiments, and also where did you collect this data, what kind of sampling methods were used, what was your criteria when selecting participants for your research, the data collection, and also the type of data collection techniques you used, right? And also justification for them must also be provided. If you are using very common sort of data collection or data analysis methods, probably you may not need to explain the procedures involved in each and every method in detail, because you can refer to some other sources where these methods are explained in very detail. But if you are using a very new method which is not very popular or which hasn't been quoted very well, then you will need to explain all the procedures involved in that particular method in detail. For example, a data collection method or maybe a data analysis method, right? You need to explain them in detail. And also, as Prof. Benaragama mentioned previously, those days it was encouraged actually to write these research method sections, abstract sections, everything using past tense. But that is not the case right now. It has changed because the research world is very dynamic. Journals, they actually change their practices from time to time. Accordingly, you can use the simple tense as well. But sometimes still the researchers use past tense when they write the methodology section. Then another important section is results section. As I said at the beginning, some journals encourage you to combine the results and the discussion sections together. Sometimes you may have to present these two sections separately. When you present these two sections separately, remember, results section is only to present your results. This section should not include your discussions or any interpretations. No, this is not the section for that. When you present your results, you must make sure that you present these results in an objective manner, emphasizing your significant results, right? You have to think of a suitable method or suitable sequence to present your results as well. Some people adopt the sequence of their research objectives to present results. Some researchers might decide to go with like patterns, various patterns arise during the data analysis, that the sequence can also be adopted when you present your results. And also sometimes you can, at the time of designing your research methodology also, you can come up with a sequence or a kind of a structure for presenting your results. So either of these methods can be used when you decide the sequence of presenting your results. And another very important thing when you present results is actually, how are we going to present results, right? Mostly people use figures, diagrams, graphs, photographs, even maps, drawings to present their results. And also you use text as well. We largely use actually text. So one thing we need to remember is when we go for a combination of both graphical interpretations of your results as well as text, you must make sure that you are not repeating everything what you had in a figure or graph within the text as well. That is not needed. unless such a repetition is really needed. So when you use text, what you basically need to do is actually give a summarized form of your results already presented using figures, graphs, or tables. And also when you use figures, graphs, and tables, you must make sure that they are readable, they are legible. Don't use very little tiny letters which are difficult to be read, right? And also you must make sure not to overload your figures, graphs, table with a lot of data, right? That is also an important thing, because then that will distract your, that will actually become a reason for distracting your audience. And also these figures, graphs must be self-explanatory. They should be able to speak for themselves. For example, by using figure legends, these legends must be very descriptive. The figures or tables must be able to speak for themselves, which means they must be descriptive and informative enough. And also you must make sure to number these figures, graphs, and tables according to the journal guideline. And also make sure that you provide appropriate references within the text to your tables, figures, whatever. They must be referred within the text as well. Just simply having figures or tables separately and having your text separately is not a good thing. There must be a clear link must be established between the two things. Remember that mostly the readers, they only skim through your research manuscript. They don't read the entire thing. Therefore, whenever you use figures, tables, and sort of like graphical representations, make sure that they are self-explanatory as much as possible. Here I have got a little example for data representation. So here is a table given here, table number 4. It has a clear title and the data has been presented very clearly. And here is an explanation. Here the explanation says, as shown in table 4, X1 indicated, here X1 indicated meeting time, quality, and budget goals with a mean value of 4.287. So this mean value has been quoted here. And then here it goes about telling that, okay, as shown in table 4, X1 was equivalent to 4.340 for the group called owners. And for the group called contractors, it's a different means. And for the group called designers, it's another different mean. Likewise, those differences are highlighted here. But you should not go about giving reasons for these differences. That should happen within the discussion section. So discussion is for that. Within the discussion section, you must interpret your results. This is the section where you interpret your results, right? Here you should be able to explain how your results have been able to address your research questions, problem statement, hypotheses, and so on. And also the meaning of your results in the context of the existing body of knowledge, which means within the discussion section, you are supposed to refer to other sources, the literature sources, and compare your results and make a discussion and interpretation based on the findings of other people's work, right? So you should be able to explain the meaning of your results in the context of existing body of knowledge, right? There you can explain, you can talk about the trends identified within your results, the significant effects of your results, and how they become similar, how well they align with the existing findings of the current knowledge base, or what kind of differences are there. Everything has to be discussed within this section, right? So if there are multiple explanations are prevailing for a particular result, right? Again, you have to explain all these multiple explanations must be presented. Right? And also within the discussion section, you can suggest further research as well. And within the discussion section, also you must make sure discussion must be concise, it must be brief, but at the same time, it must be informative. Right? Don't use jargon which are difficult for the readers to understand. Right? And also make sure that you do not introduce new vocabulary which you haven't used in the previous section of your manuscript. If you really want to use a new vocabulary, probably you can go back and include the same vocabulary in other parts of the manuscript as well for the previous sections. And make sure that you do not overstate the importance of your research findings and your discussion, right? Be genuine, right? Whatever the interpretations that you are going to produced within the discussion section must be based on the facts. There shouldn't be any imaginations, right? So this is how a discussion section must be compiled. Right here, I have given an example for a discussion section from a manuscript. So as you can see here, you do in the discussion section, you should not present all the findings once again. This is not the place for that because you have already presented your results or the findings, right? Here, you can simply summarize your findings. As you can see here, the section, this one, it refers to a previous figure as well. And here it summarizes some of the factors that were derived through the results. And then the discussion section, it goes about explaining each factor in detail. Within each factor, let's take this one called project efficiency. They describe the results, the summary of results derived with respect to that particular factor called project efficiency. And then the author goes about discussing those results. So here the results, they appear in the form of, the results are very objective, right? They are numerical, the results are there. Those numerical results are here compared with reference to the findings from other authors' works with reference to the existing knowledge. So here is an example for a discussion section. Then the next most important thing is the conclusion section. This is one important thing we must know is this is not the section for summarizing a manuscript. This is not where you summarize your manuscript. The summary goes to the abstract section, the section called abstract. Conclusion section is basically for you to provide a brief summary of your aim and maybe the methods used, and then clearly present the conclusions for your aim and objectives. You must there clearly state whether you have been able to achieve your aim and objectives. If so, what are the results, what are the solutions that you were able to derive with reference to your aim and objectives. And also you can use the conclusion section to reiterate the contributions you have created or new knowledge you have created, the new knowledge you have brought in. And also this is a section for you to talk about the practical implications of your research. What kind of practicality it involves, how it's going to help the practitioners maybe, or how your results or the conclusions might help the policymakers maybe. It depends on the discipline. Right? So likewise, the conclusion is the section for you to explain the practical implications of your research as well, and also to suggest the further research. Conclusion section must be supportable and should not extend beyond your results. This is another mistake done by many researchers. When they write the conclusion sections, they tend to include totally new things which were not included anywhere else in the manuscript, or not even available or not even presented in the results section. That is not good practice. If you do that, again your paper will be rejected or you will get criticism. Right? You will get your article will be criticized by the reviewers. Therefore, please make sure that you are not going to include any undue speculations or imaginations which were not a part of your research. Right? And also your conclusion section must be brief and concise, and it is worth remembering. So therefore, when you write a conclusion section, make sure that you write it in a manner that is worth remembering. Okay, let me come back to this one, abstract, because the reason that I had it as the last thing under the section of composing sections, because we write the abstract section as the very last thing. Although some researchers might confuse, in the sense some people might start writing, although it appears at the very beginning of a research manuscript, this is the last thing you normally attend, right? Therefore, abstract is a summary. That is a summary of the entire research manuscript, and the extent or the length of an abstract can also vary depending on the journal. Right? Some journals allow you to go up to 300 words, or some people might restrict it between 200 to 250 words. It depends, right? Anyway, please remember that within an abstract section, you can provide little bit of background information about your research, but don't go about providing a lot of information about your background, because then that will then that will limit your ability to present other data, other summaries of other sections of your research manuscript within the abstract section. Therefore, make sure that you clearly mention the aim and objectives of your research. And also, you must be able to provide a summary of your research methods as well as research findings and conclusions. Because together with the title of a research manuscript, an abstract plays a significant role. Here, a significant role in the sense abstracts are also used by abstracting and indexer services. Therefore, it is really important your abstract from the very first letter up until end of your manuscript, the whole thing is really important, right? Because mostly the readers, they only read the abstract. By reading the abstract, they decide whether that particular article is relevant for them or not. Therefore, abstract is kind of a selling point. It's an advertisement for your research manuscript. Within an abstract section, in a full, I'm talking about the contents of a full research manuscript now. Therefore, within an abstract, you normally don't put references, right? It can vary depending on some journals as well. And normally you do not refer to other graphs or figures within the abstract section, right? And also within the abstract section, don't promise too much. Make sure your abstract is a true reflection of your entire manuscript. Right? So here I have included an example of an abstract. Some journals actually, they go for a breakdown. Within the abstract itself, they clearly identify several subheadings like purpose, design methodology, findings, originality of the paper, and so on. Right? So as you can see here, here it clearly says the purpose. It doesn't have any background information, this particular abstract. It doesn't have any background information about the research. It straight away begins with the statement, okay, the purpose or the aim of this paper is to systematically analyze. That's how it has begun. And here is another example. This one has provided some background information about the article. And in the second sentence, it starts mentioning the aim. This article explores risk awareness and risk management practices, right? That's how that particular the aim has been mentioned. Previously, those days, the practice was that abstracts are written using the past tense. The conclusions or the methodology sections are written using the past tense. But now it has changed slightly. Even as you can see here, the aim has been presented using the present tense. Even the methodology has been presented, has been described using the present tense. So likewise, the things have now changed. With that, I have come to an end of the section called composing various sections of a research manuscript. Now I'm planning to move on to talk a little bit about referencing, because referencing is also another important thing, because when you carry out literature review, that means here the requirement arises for you to adopt a proper referencing method, right? So here referencing deals with the fact that you incorporate other people's work into your own research. There are three methods of incorporating other people's work into your own work. The three methods are called summarizing, paraphrasing, and quoting. Summarizing here in the sense, maybe one entire big book can be summarized into a single sentence, right? That is what we call summarizing, using your own words. The secondly, paraphrasing means, it's not summary. Paraphrasing here in the sense, somebody else's work, you try to give the same meaning, the same idea, you are going to present it using your own words, but at the same time using a different structure. When you paraphrase somebody else's idea, make sure you are not only changing the words, but also you are changing the structure of that, the original worker, the author's work as well. Thirdly, quoting. Quoting means exact reproduction of somebody else's work, right? So when you quote something, you have to put them within inverted commas. Sometimes you may require to italic the direct quotations as well. We call them direct quotations. And sometimes you may have to indicate them by using indenting as well within your manuscript. There are various requirements, right? So with reference to each one of these different types of incorporating other people's work into your own work, right? there are different types of referencing styles: APA style, MLA style, Chicago style, IEEE, Vancouver style, Harvard style, and there are a lot more. Right? Different journals adopt different referencing styles, right? I'm quite familiar with Harvard referencing style because that is the style mostly used in my discipline, but other styles are also being adopted. So here I have given an example for the Harvard referencing style. Harvard referencing style involves two elements. Those two elements are in-text citations and in-list of references. In-text citation means whenever you use any of these three methods of incorporating other people's work into your work, you must provide an in-text citation for that. Right? This may be a summary here. The very first the example I have given here. If it's a summary, then you have to quote the author's surnames along with the year of publication. If it's a paraphrasing also, you can use the same citation style. Sometimes, because within the Harvard referencing also, there are various styles. Within the Harvard referencing, again, there are various styles adopted by different institutions or different journals. Therefore, it can vary. Sometimes for paraphrasing, for in-text citations, you provide page numbers as well. Anyway, for direct quotations, definitely you have to provide, other than the author's surnames and the year of publications, you have to provide the page numbers as well. The second element involved in Harvard referencing is the end list of references. When you compile the end list of references, you must make sure every citation included within your manuscript should have a detailed bibliographic information provided within the references, end list of references. So within the end list of references, normally under Harvard referencing, you include authors' surnames with their initials and the name of the journal article, if it's a journal article, right? And also the name of the journals and the volume and the issue number and the page number. There can be slight variations from journal to journal, so I'm not going to talk about them in detail. So as I said before, there are various referencing styles involved, so you have to strictly adhere to the style recommended by a given journal. And a little bit about paraphrasing is also important. Here paraphrasing means, as I said before, expressing the same idea of some other author's work, but by using different words and different structure. Right? So I have given an example here. Two examples have been given. Here the original the sentence was, the most impactful phase in terms of construction and demolition waste generation is the end of life of a building, which accounts for 50%. When you paraphrase that particular thing, you need to make sure you change the words without changing the idea, as well as you go for a different structure. Therefore, in my paraphrasing, I have started off from somewhere here. So what I've done here is, the phase in which a building reaches its end of life produces the highest amount of construction and demolition waste, which accounts to 50% of the total waste. So here in my paraphrase, the words have also been changed as well as the structure. In certain circumstances, you cannot go for different words or different terminology, because when you say construction and demolition waste, it's sort of a accepted terminology in the industry. Right? Therefore, I haven't changed that. So likewise, another example has been given. So remember, paraphrasing means you have to change the words as well as the structure. So you may end up making a lot of mistakes when you do paraphrasing. Some people think just changing or looking for synonyms and including synonyms within when you do paraphrasing, that is enough. No, that is not enough. Then that will be counted as plagiarism. That is plagiarism. And at the same time, when you change words or terminology, when you do paraphrasing, you might sometimes end up changing the meaning of the original author's work. That is also that is also plagiarism. Right? That is also one of the mistakes done by researchers quite frequently. Right? So accordingly, plagiarism is something that we must be really aware of and we must be really careful about. Plagiarism means stealing somebody else's, or stealing or maybe actually using somebody else's ideas as your own ideas, intentionally or unintentionally. And also, when you sometimes paraphrasing might result in plagiarism, although you cite the work properly within your text. But if you end up with inadequate paraphrasing, like not changing the words properly or not changing the structure properly, they all will end up your work being considered as plagiarism. Right? And also when you reproduce other people's work, that means direct quotations, right? If you still cite them and you use exact words as given in the original author's work, but if you still don't use quotation marks, that will also be counted as plagiarism. It's a serious offense. It's an intellectual offense. It's a serious offense. Therefore, you must be careful about that. And also using somebody else's spoken words as your own words, that is also counted as plagiarism. So moving on from there, right, I have few more slides to talk about how to plan your research manuscript. During the planning process, you must be really careful about doing a lot of homework, because planning involves more time than sometimes doing your research, doing the hands-on work. If you straight away move on to hands-on work without doing proper homework and proper preparatory work, that will end up your research becoming a disaster sometimes. Therefore, you must be really careful to spend a lot of time, adequate time to design, to plan your research, and think about what kind of literature to be used, what is going to be the duration of your research, what kind of research methodology to be used, and you have to select your research methods very wisely. And also don't be reluctant to seek help from other researchers, other expert researchers. We as researchers, we have our seniors, we have senior academics, we have our own supervisors, as well as we have our other colleagues outside our institution as well. So I usually talk with my other colleagues in other universities as well when I carry out a research. And also doing collaborative work is another good thing. Collaborate with other researchers from other institutions, the locally based institutions, as well as foreign institutions. So these things are really important during the planning stage of a research. And also make sure you exactly know what you are going to research, how you are going to research, why you are going to research. These important questions need to be answered as early as possible. And also know how your resource will contribute to the current body of knowledge. Have some little clue about how my research is going to contribute to the existing body of knowledge. You should have some conceptual idea about that. Otherwise, your journey will be very vague and it will be very dark. So please try to overcome that. And also make sure that you focus on your research problem or aim and the research objectives throughout your research process. And also at the time of starting a research project itself, you can think of what kind of publications you are going to go ahead with. Are you going to do conference publications, or are you going to do journal publications? How are you going to manage it? And who are going to be the contributors? And who is going to be the first author for a particular journal, for a particular manuscript? Because a first author is the person normally draft the entire manuscript, whereas the others will provide their feedback and do the revising work and so on. Therefore, it's really important that you decide the contributors as well, and who's going to be the lead author. And also arranging ethical clearances. Our third speaker will speak about these ethical clearances in detail, and make sure that you plan your time properly. So here is the writing process. You have to have a clear outline established at the very beginning, which means the structure of your research manuscript. Then you know how to feed information into each and every different section, right? So that outline must be there. Then you have to plan. The outline must be there. Then you have to start writing the drafting, produce the first draft. Once you produce the first draft, you can circulate your article among other researchers, the other authors. Sometimes different authors, they divide the work between themselves. So different sections are compiled, different sections are composed by different authors. That can also happen. And also revisiting manuscript is really important. And several rounds of editing. It's again, because writing, especially a journal manuscript, not only a journal manuscript, conference manuscript also, this writing process is very tedious. Like it takes time, it takes a lot of time. Therefore, you must be ready to take that pain. And also, finally, you can finalize your article. So let me, with this slide, come to an end of this presentation. Here are some tips for you to improve quality of writing of your research manuscript. Make sure you have to select a journal, right? That is the very first thing you have to do. There are various guidelines and various tips that involve or essential things that you should know when you select a proper journal as well, but we do not have time to go through those things here. Therefore, what I have to tell you is make sure that you read your journal guideline, whatever the journal within which that you are going to publish your research, right? Read the guideline from A to Z. That is really important. Otherwise, your article will straight away get rejected at the editor's level itself. Right? And also make sure you write your article in a meaningful manner. That is how you can attract a good audience, improve your citations, right? Write it in a meaningful and a scientific manner, and make sure your paper reads well. Right? Don't use long sentences. At the same time, don't use simple sentences which are very disintegrated and choppy. Right? You have to make sure your work is grammatically correct. Get it proofread as much as possible. If you have a native English speaker on board in your publication, that a native English speaker can actually do the proofreading and grammatical corrections and all. Otherwise, you can seek help from one of your colleagues who is good in English as well as who has a generic understanding of your subject area to do the proofreading as well. Right? Those days it was actually encouraged to write articles using the third persons, the passive tense, but now it has changed. Again, it depends on the type of journal. Some journals still encourage you to use passive tense as well. And also using past tense, present tense, it depends, but sometimes you have to write using the future tense as well, especially when you suggest future directions. And also language proofreading is essential, as I said before, and get constructive feedback from your colleagues, from your seniors or the researchers as much as possible. And also you should have the patience to bear whatever the feedback you are going to receive from the reviewers. That is also an important thing. And also when you use secondary sources as references, you have to be really careful, because sometimes when you use secondary sources, you may not end up with the same idea as given by or as indicated by the original author. So these are some of the tips for you to improve quality of your writing. So with that, I have come to an end of this presentation. So here, are we going to open up for questions now? Or we don't have? Okay, there's a question here. The topic-wise breakdown is acceptable in abstract. Again, it depends on the type of journal. Some journals specifically ask you to go for a clear breakdown. They have their own breakdown which you need to adhere to. Otherwise, if there aren't any specific instructions in that regard, then you have to go for one single abstract without breaking it into several sections. Shall we move on to the next presentation, or are there any questions from anyone else?
Dr. Roshani, there's a general question of the people, how to write an abstract. And, a lot of people do it at the end by looking at develop the full paper and then cut and paste part and parcel of the main paper and then try to produce the abstract. And so when you look at it, you find the same thing explained in the text, and it's a shorter version of the paper that you submit as abstract. Now, can you explain some of the issues that you consider in developing a proper abstract? As it's abstract, it has to be abstract. in the abstract form. So how do you get the abstract at the end? You may be having a working abstract, and finally you produce a proper abstract that will reflect the work that you have done, which you describe in the paper. And also a title, because when it comes to the academic council research topics that have been proposed, I find most of the research topics we cannot really see what kind of study is being proposed. So if you can a little bit elaborate on that, I think it will be useful for the attendees. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the question, sir. So when you compile an abstract, as you said, yes, of course, you can start off with a working abstract, which means at the time you structure or outline, prepare an outline for your research manuscript itself, you can point out or identify the points to be addressed within your abstract. But that is not the right time for you to finalize the abstract. Definitely, you have to wait until end of your research manuscript, up to the even after writing the conclusion section only you have to start finalizing actually your abstract. Within the abstract section, you can use some information as it is. I mean, within the manuscript, for example, let's say some contextual or background information have been included. You can use some sentences as it is within the abstract section, but I don't accept the fact that the entire abstract being a patchwork of information taken straight away, directly taken from your manuscript. It should include, definitely it's a summary. It's a summary of the entire paper. For example, conclusion is not a summary, but abstract is a summary. It must be able to give a true reflection of the entire picture. For somebody, a reader, reading the abstract should be able to know what is the aim, what are the objectives, what methods have been adopted, what are the main findings, not all the findings, the main findings, because within a short abstract, we are not in a position to list down all the findings, just a summary of significant findings and what is the conclusion and also the way forward. As long as you can address these things, and also sometimes the practical implications as well. Some journals specifically, they have they include those journals, those who have gone for subtitles or subsections within an abstract, they specifically included the thing called practical implications. So when you talk about those things, straight away taking direct information as it is from research manuscript may not be a good thing, because it's a summary. Therefore, my advice is actually, as you said, someone can at the very beginning itself, at the time of outlining, preparation of the outline of the paper, you can draft your abstract, and by the time you finish your conclusion, you can come back and prepare your manuscript in detail as a finished work. And also when you do titles, as you mentioned in the academic council, what we have experienced so far, sometimes people fail to, when they provide titles, they provide to give the true meaning. In other words, they fail to reflect the exact purpose of the study. For example, the aim. You should be able to reflect the aim of a study within the research, within the title. Sometimes even the methodology as well. For example, what kind of an investigation, probably, maybe if it's a case study based paper, then you should be able to mention that. So that particular, the methodology, especially the aim, must be reflected within the title, as well as if possible the methodology as well. But the title also should not be too long. Are there any other questions?
There's a question on how to find the matching journal. Did you answer that question?
Sorry, sir?
How to find matching journals. When you do a research, how to find a suitable journal to publish. That's a question from Ms.
How to find matching journal?
Yeah. Perhaps when you do a research, you do read lot of research articles. And then you have a good, clear idea about the kind of journals and the levels of journals that you find in a particular discipline. Now, then at the end, if you have done a good review of the literature from various journals, then you are in a good position to understand which journal is best suited for my publication. So that you can see, and then also you can see sometimes your article can appear in a totally different journal, but there's a good readership in that journal relevant to your work. So it's a kind of a learned judgment. So you have to study, see the kind of journals, and as a in my discipline, I can see that what journals I can recommend, but I may not have idea. If you say when it comes to food science or some other discipline, I have no idea whatsoever which journal is the best for your paper. So it is your judgment, and it comes through your experience of reviewing number of journal articles for your research work. Anything that you want to add, Roshani?
And also to add a small thing to what you explained, sir, for beginner researchers, actually, this is why it's important to speak to senior researchers, your supervisors, other senior researchers, because they know the most relevant journals in your discipline. So that can be a start for your research, for you to make a start on your research. You can speak to other people, other senior researchers, and let them get them to tell you what are the most relevant journals. And when you start off with one journal and find the most related articles, and they are within that article, you can find other suitable articles, as well as when you go to the final end list of references also, there are a lot of other journals, new journals. You may get to know about other journals which publish relevant or related articles. So likewise, you can expand your knowledge, because this is a step-by-step process. Because in one instance, for example, like when we start with undergraduate students, at the very beginning, we tell them what are the most relevant journals, but at a certain point, they should come to a point that on their own, they should be able to find relevant journals, relevant articles, and so on. So for a beginner researcher, it's really important that you speak to your senior researchers, supervisors as much as possible, and get them to advise you about some initial tips.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Roshani, for your interesting and fruitful presentation. Then, on behalf of the Staff Development Center, I really want to pay our gratitude upon you. Thank you very much again and again for your contribution. Okay, respectful panelists and all the attendees, I'm going to announce the next session, the third and final session of the day. Professor Chandana Jayalath will be conducted this particular presentation. Please let me introduce Professor Jayalath to the audience. Professor Jayalath, Professor in Quantity Surveying of University of Vocational Technology, attached to the Department of Quantity Surveying, and he is also a chartered quantity surveyor, acquired his professional qualifications, full professional qualification, and accredited mediator at the Centre of Effective Dispute Resolution in London. And he has authored 8 textbooks for quantity surveying students, and he is one of the principal authors of the Quantity Surveying Dictionary, and instrumental behind the civil engineering standard method of measurement in Sri Lanka. And also Doctor of Science, also Doctor of Science in Management of Engineering and Technology with Cum Laude Honorary Distinction, California Southern University. Master of Science in Project Management acquired from University of Moratuwa, and Postgraduate Diploma in Construction Management acquired from Open University of Sri Lanka. And he also had the Postgraduate Diploma in International Mediation, Queen's Mary and Westfield College, University of London. His bachelor's from University of Moratuwa, BSc Honours in Quantity Surveying. In addition to that, there are a number of other professional qualifications and experiences acquired by Professor Chandana Jayalath as member of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators, United Kingdom, Fellow of the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors, United Kingdom, Fellow of the Institute of Quantity Survey, Sri Lanka. As a researcher, he has published nearly 50 research papers in journals and international research conferences, over 100 monographs in scientific magazines, and over 250 newspaper articles. Currently, Professor Jayalath serving here in this university as the Director of Staff Development Center. Sir, I cordially invite you to conduct the lecture. This is your time. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Ilantha, for your introduction. Well, last man has no chance as usual. The 50 overs match. Well, I thought of better, since we have been bombarded with a lot of informative and resourceful lecture series. In the morning time, I have to say good afternoon. And my memory is going back one of the Middle Eastern stories where the old father had a big well, and he wanted to distribute among three children or the sons he had, and the wealth had 17 camels, and the sons were very desperate of taking over the property. Well, the eldest son wanted to grab mostly everything, but he suggested I need half, 50%, by being very adamant. But the next son, by being very democratic, said, okay, I'm happy with 1/3 of the wealth. Then just say for the purpose of discussion, the next son, I asked for 1/9. Now, how can you distribute these 17 live camels among these three sons, which is practically impossible? They are live camels. Therefore, they decided to go to a third person, a third man, a wiser woman. And that woman said, well, I don't know how to help you out in this issue, but at least I am having 1 camel, which I am happy to offer you. Then they all together had 18 camels. And then they started apportioning their liabilities with the help of 18 camels altogether. So the first son asks, I need half. So 18 divided by 2 is 9. 18 divided by 3 is 6. And 18 divided by 9, 2. So 9 plus 6 plus 2 became 17, and they had 1 camel left, and that was handed back to that wise woman. Just see, I wanted to bring this analogy in order for you to understand the artistic nature of decision sciences or decision making process, where people tend to go by highly qualitative approach in taking decisions according to their perception, beliefs, and preferences. But mathematics help you out also without forgetting the fact that the research is also some kind of an art than science. And when you say art, is it measurable, by the way? Is it measurable? It is measurable to some extent. There are various ways of doing that. And I'm going to talk about a topic of that nature, which is ethics. Now, ethics is not that easily measurable, but you can objectively decide upon what type of action would be considered as ethical or what type of actions would not be considered as ethical. That depends in the context in which it occurs mostly, and from place to place, organization to organization, and so on and so forth. Now, our context is research in a higher education context, where we are trying to look for what the people have so far said in the history throughout the history. So the topic of this session, I made research to publication, ethical dimensions. Now, there are two components. One side you have ethics, other side you have research. And you must have got a clear idea as to what the nature and the complexity involved in doing research. It's all about pursuing solutions of a given issue. We are trying to solve a problem, existing problem, and add the new knowledge to the existing body of knowledge. So that is all about research. And when you say ethics, ethics is a catch-all term, one would argue. Ethics, by saying ethics, it's a set of virtues, set of morals, set of principles that our lives have been influenced a lot. And it is all about the human behavior within a moral context. So different people have assigned different definitions onto the topic of ethics. Now, I'm trying to get these two together and continue this as we can go up until 12:30 as planned. Then I will have to curtail a little bit on the way that I have been in my mind to continue, but I don't want to too much depend upon the PowerPoint presentation. I will curtail. But anyway, research ethics is all about the application of ethical principles in conducting research, basically speaking. And we know in the overall research process, you can clearly identify 6 different stages or even 8 different stages. The stages I have identified is in line with the way the ethics apply. Now, at the beginning, you have conceptualization stage, concepts, you have mind maps, you have some kind of an idea. It's a very initial inception stage as to what you are going to try to say, trying to do, and trying to find out. That is conceptualization. And in that, as Dr. Roshani said, there should be scientific merit. And remember, there's a thing called risk as well as benefit. So you cannot overweigh. You have to strike a certain balance, particularly in the case of researchers where human biology is involved, where human interaction, human behavior, and human participation is involved. So quite pathetically, most of the protocols have been devised and introduced to the research arena by various organizations throughout the history in order to control this, in order to address the issues in association with the research in connection with the human factor. Therefore, it's very important to make sure that the ethics principles have been strictly observed and they are not violated, either having knowingly or unknowingly, when you are conducting research. The second point, when you call upon the human factor into the research process, there's a thing called informed consent that I'm going to elaborate a little bit more. And I have a long list of ethical breaches, which you may find very funny with that at the end of my session. Okay, and then the participants, when they are recruited, you must also consider their right of privacy as well as confidentiality. Confidentiality is a function of privacy and vice versa. Therefore, you must inform your interviewees, maybe your focus group members of the discussion, right? They are being interviewed, and their interview outcome will be taken backward for the research. So they must be knowing that you are under observation. And you are under scrutiny, right? This is called informed consent. That consent must have been taken up, and there's a formal way of doing that. And my memory is again going back to another story, which is the thing called Hawthorne effect. You must have heard about this. Hawthorne effect is where in a manufacturing setup, for example, you want to go and take a measurement on the productivity level at certain regular intervals. So as a research team, you go and observe and take measurements of the units produced daily basis or hourly basis, whatever. Okay. Then those who are subject to research, if it is a garment factory, the ladies may be sewing clothes, taking buttons and all collars and sort of so on and so forth, all repetitive tasks. And they know that they are under observation, they are under experimentation. So there's a real psychological impact, and you may not definitely get the right results because of this psychological pressure. So this is called Hawthorne effect. Now, you must keep that as well one side when you're talking about the ethics of research, how to reduce the impact because of the Hawthorne effect. And the third point is during the intervention and measurement, the procedure to which participants subject to. That is the whole subject I was talking about. And then the release of results. Well, when you are considering the release of results or the getting a paper published, at that time, you must call backward and say who were the participants, who were the contributors, whether they have been adequately acknowledged, okay, for their contribution they made, and so on and so forth. That's also very, very important. And also, what about the anonymity? What about the confidentiality that you have promised them to, restore throughout the research process? That's also very, very important. You must not forget that factor, because it's all about maybe the numbers, maybe the behavioral patterns, maybe very, very sensitive information. In the case of construction, for example, we're not dealing with the cost factors, they are commercially secrets. And in the case of manufacturing, certain products, there are commercial secrets of the taste of biscuit manufacturing company, for example, and so on and so forth. Therefore, you must look at this whole saga of ethics objectively, so that it will be easy for you to take a decision and for you to act upon a given context, right? So to do that, there are certain protocols which are coming in the next set of slides. Certain protocols have been devised and introduced for the help of the researchers. Well, this is all about research misconduct, deception, that is the issue of disclosure, whether you are going to be told information about the aim of the study and whether you are misleading participants. I know that you don't want to do that, but unknowingly, if you tend to do that, then you will be caught up in breach of ethics. Then plagiarism is now fully aware what you mean by plagiarism. You are not giving due credit to the original author. So copying ideas, which is intellectual theft, could be interpreted as an intellectual theft unless you give the due recognition to the original authors. So that is plagiarism. And be careful, there's a thing called self-plagiarism also, where you quote your own original work, but without giving a proper citation or rather references. Then no scientific basis. It's not necessarily a matter of ethics, but a matter of quality, a matter of scholarly contribution. Then the lack of objectivity and integrity in the whole design process. I have come across several, I have been working for some few research journals where I have been called upon to review certain papers. And most of the times I come across this situation, the lack of objectivity and not identifying the methodical constraints of the subject and so on, of the study and so on. Now, that's a normally subheading given, allowing the authors to come up with their limitations and parameters within which they did their research. So that has to be properly cited, properly mentioned in your research paper. And also misinterpretation is one of the very grave problems, which I have several case studies which I'm going to show you as to how you may, or somebody might misinterpret the results, right? And another situation is where people do fabricating or manipulation or falsification of data. That's a big issue. That's going to be very, very bad and very unethical. And not following the appropriate ascription of authorship. What do you mean by ascription? That's you may have multiple authors, and most of the papers, good papers, there's a small space allocated for their contribution. Who did what finally? So and so design the research, outline the research, and then so and so collected data, so and so analyzed data, and so on and so forth. So their contribution. And when you are putting them all in sequence, due credit should go according to the way they contributed. So this is all about ascription of authorship. That's very important. Sometimes I have seen the research started with 3 gentlemen, but finally the entire thing on the soldier of just 1 or 2. So then they may or may not decide whether the other author should be actually included in the list of the authorship. Therefore, we have to be very, very careful. One of the good ways of doing research is to organize your staff. Who is going to do what, and so on. That must be clearly demarcated at the beginning. Although there are overlaps of contribution, it doesn't mean that you do this, he does that, and so on. But it's a collective effort, and you must at least do reasonable justice to the final outcome. That's all about that ascription. Then, not respecting the right of privacy, we were talking about, particularly when the research has a human data, the biodata, and also commercial secrets, certain financial information, and that sort of things. It's not only personal, but legal. So, a legal person. And you must give due respect to the right of privacy at the beginning. And if you have a dilemma, then better you consult someone who is senior to you, who is very much familiar with the setup when conducting research, especially when you're dealing with, when you tend to feel that you are going to encroach unnecessarily somebody else's, privacy. That's very, very important. The other thing is confidentiality and not respecting the right to anonymity. Anonymity is it's a blind review process. Anonymity. Most of the reviewers are not disclosed openly, but they're anonymous. They're anonymously listed out. We don't know who is going to review our paper. The second and third point is where the rights of vulnerable groups, particularly the community type research, where you want to find out the level of compensation, for example, got affected because of the central highway. For example, there's a vulnerable group. Eventually, that is something unavoidable because of the country's development efforts. The projects happen and projects progress, and certain segment of the society will have to sacrifice their properties and their know-how and their societal ties. Therefore, which we call in community-based research the vulnerable groups. So, very, very important to give due respect and regard to the rights of these groups. Another important aspect is the environment, and more than ever in the history, the sustainable concept that came in at the beginning of 1980s, if I'm not mistaken, and all the considerations arising out of this concept became very sensitive issue, and a lot of protocols have been come up and introduced in order to consider the thing called regenerational equity, point regeneration equity. Therefore, even in the research arena, the consideration or the emphasis given to environmental factors have been found to be very paramount now these days. So anything that is having a stake in the environment, you must be very sensitive and be careful when you are designing and conducting your research. Then fraud, we know fabrication of data, which is possible, especially in the quantitative, when you are using the statistical technique to measure the confidence levels and regression, correlation, that sort of things. Even very simple descriptive statistics, you can fabricate a lot. And that's a mischief. That is not ethical at all. Fabrication of data in order to achieve your intended results, and you want to interpret something else than what has been actually found throughout your research. Therefore, you are finally manipulating strategically the whole outcome of the research in favor of somebody else's want. Therefore, that is also not ethical. Then the infringement of a copyright, starting with the issue of plagiarism. We have copyright law to govern the conduct, and that has a direct influence on conducting research as well. Submitting or publishing the same paper to different journals is not ethical. Patent application without informing the collaborator. Now, another experience I have been experiencing throughout is where the teachers submit their research proposals without having any research collaboration. They may be doing personally or private basis, self-funding manner, but still they may have to definitely in one fine day disseminate the research outcome. Unless they do that, how the rest of the world know that you did something benefiting for the community or the discipline that you belong to. Therefore, there's no point of making proposals unless you do the research and come up with something tangible, something readable for the rest of the world. So that's very important. So collaborators going for collaboration will enhance the situation and ease out the process and will help you out, not only in terms of financial, but various other ways. Then include a colleague as an author on a paper in return for a favor without contribution to the paper is very petty thing. And trimming outliers, I will tell you know the outliers are those data that is observed data not fitting to certain parameters or certain region or certain state line. So those who are very much familiar with the regression and correlation analysis, they know very well about outliers. And without any rationale whatsoever, they may truncate and they may purposely manipulate the whole database, and in order to make sure that everything falls in the right place or the right angle you want. Therefore, trimming outliers is not ethical. Inappropriate statistical technique used to denote significance of the research. Well, I have come across a couple of things. When you are trying to apply a statistical technique, then you must be very careful in using the technique that is most appropriate to the given research or the method that you need to, or what you really expect out from the application of that statistical technique. So each technique has its own profile, has its own limitation. So therefore, you must be very, very careful in selecting the right statistical tool in order to derive a result or the analyzed data. Bypassing the peer review process is not happening actually in journal publication. Definitely there's a peer review process. And stretching the truth on a grant application that is understood and submitting manuscript to 2 or more journals, I have seen at the same time with the view to receive feedback. Now, we all experience that getting a research paper published is a time-taking process. It requires a lot of concentration, patience, and some effort to keep on following. And you must attend to all the feedback rightly, otherwise it's keeping on bouncing back, and therefore you will really feel fed up with the paper or with the submission. Therefore, in some of the cases, it may have, it may be taking nearly 1 hour, even more than 1 hour in getting a paper published. So that depends. We don't know when you posted and when you submitted. We don't know what's going to happen thereafter until you get a notice. Therefore, you are very much, impatient to get the paper published. Because of this impatience, sometimes you tend to submit the same manuscript to many other journals, which is not acceptable. And there's a declaration, express undertaking is taken from the publisher, from you, the author, saying that this manuscript is submitted only for the journal, for this particular journal, and not published elsewhere, and so on and so forth. That is very important. That's a kind of a part of the ethical statement in any typical journal. Making derogatory comments and personal attacks in your review of the submittals. Well, that is also understood. I don't want to too much talk about this matter, derogatory comments, and you know about that. And making significant deviations from the research protocol, and not reporting an adverse event in a human research experiment. You cannot keep silence, and rejecting a manuscript for publication even without reading it. So therefore, the list is not exhaustive. If you want, you can have a long list of misconduct that is frequently happening. Why? We need to worry about this. We need to worry about this because we have to be professionally responsible. We have to be professionally responsible. And we must avoid, ultimately it will bounce back. It will affect your image, your credibility, and whatever you have earned so far as an academic, really, it will cause a reputational damage. So to avoid this, you must adhere to the research protocols. And also, terribly, the certain research, human researchers, where the human factor is heavily involved in medical, for example, right? The participants are there, researchers are there, various institutions, your stakeholders have been all looking at the research outcome. They may be very, very anxiously waiting for research outcome. Even the funders, the sponsors. So research should not be harmful to them. That is why there's a segment or key subheading of a research paper at the end part, asking you to give the implications, the social implications, the research implications. It is the place where you have to declare, you have to come up with as to how you anticipate the outcome would be affecting or making an impinge upon the society in large, or to the profession that you belong to, or to the discipline that you are talking about. Therefore, that's very, very important. So implications is a kind of a proactive thing, and avoid litigation at the end of the day, and avoid confusion. So, as I said, the story is not novel. This has been existing in the world so many decades, so many centuries. Berlin Code, the guidelines for human experimentation, see the study domain of research as far as the ethics are concerned, And numeric code and declaration of Helsinki, very much popular. They were talking about many facets or aspects of doing research ethically. And Belmont report, actually 1978, they have come up with three important principles. One is respect, which you are talking about all these times. Other one is justice, then the beneficence. Now, in addition to this, we have our Sri Lankan context. We should not forget that. So if you go to the Sri Lankan context, we have ethics and academic accountability for academic staff in the Sri Lankan university system, UGC 2015. That is openly available. If you just type and you will download and you can read carefully word by word and see the ethical framework as far as the research are concerned and conducted. Then there's a circular issued by the Ministry of Higher Education 2011, and also different universities, they follow more or less the same objective criteria in making research allowances and so on. We too have a research policy or other research allowance criteria inside the university. When I go to talk about a little bit on the ethical review committee, this is a theoretical framework, kind of a conceptual framework, and the research should be conducted in accordance with ethical principles. So we have origins of the UGC guideline and also consistent with the university criterion. So generally the ethics clearance must be taken. And informed consent is one of the primary things. And most of the funders, they do have the registration process up until the dissemination of research outcome at the end of the saga. Therefore, we can come up with a framework like this if you want to. Then I don't want to too much talk about the functions, committee functions, but informed consent is very important thing. Let me make a stop a little bit here. The stages of informed consent. You have something to consider deeply before you commence the study. There are various factors. Again, the list is not exhaustive. And at the beginning, just beginning of the close play of the start, there are certain considerations to be taken into account. And during the study also to be considered quite deeply. So informed consent is one of the very primary concerns or ethical matter in which you are doing research. And how to submit a proposal to an ethical clearance committee. These are the considerations. The proposal submitted for ethical approval should demonstrate that each of the following ethical aspects not only just addressed, but are discussed in a logical and cogent fashion, in a rigorous manner. Then they have a checklist. They look at the matter objectively and decide upon whether this particular research is feasible to be conducted with the ethical framework or the protocol they have come up with. So the respect, dignity, privacy, confidentiality, all these matters, and also the sampling plan, that is the type, the size, and so on. Let me add one of my very recent experiences in working with one of the conferences very recently got over during this year, at the beginning of this year. I had a paper, and the topic was something related to the price escalation mechanism. You know, in Sinhala, what we call Miller Sutra. So we have that kind of a Miller Sutra for construction industry, and that has been existing in the industry for the last 35 years. There were debates, there were arguments, and there were disagreements among the stakeholders in the industry, the contractors, consultants, employers, and so on, as to the accuracy of this formula method. Well, formula is mathematically balanced, oriented, and there's a rationale behind the way the formula has been composed of, considering various factors and so on. So mathematically, there's no question. about the rationale or the relationship of the variables, how the variables have been related together. There's no issue about that. The issue was the data that is fed into the formula. And everybody was asking whether this formula really overcompensates the contract. And the formula method is introduced with a clear mindset that this formula method will ease out the tedious, laborious job of manual calculation. That is why we are having a formula. But if you just feed wrong information in the formula, then the results would be wrong, definitely, right? And this particular paper I had, he had checked this validity of the formula. How? By just approaching only 5 people, saying that they are experts. So personally, when I got the paper, the very first impression that I got is that the level of expertise the so-called experts had. When I see the profile of the expert panel, then I saw just 8 years, 10 years, 12 years. So I have a big doubt, and it's an ethical thing, not to call them one side the experts, they are not experts. And on the other hand, the number of people involved in the interview process, just 5 people. So how can you depend upon the outcome or the findings or the perception of this 5 personnel, and how can you generalize the outcome and declare that this particular formula is wrong? The particular formula overcompensates. So just see the magnitude of the whole issue. So it is not something publishable unless the author comes backward with the proper justifications and proper validation process. Therefore, the sampling plan is very, very important. Again, it's a very basic thing. So it should reflect a fair participation, and it should encompass a fair sort of representative. It has to be representative of the industry. So just 5 people cannot come like that or come to a decision. Therefore, very important, the competence and capacity of the researcher, and so on and so forth. So ethical clearance is one of the milestones, a very important aspects in make sure that you do your research within the ethical framework. What I have quoted here from Taylor Francis Group, they had published this one under the part of their author services, and you may not be able to perhaps read this figure, but I have summarized that in the other side, the right side. Before you submit, make sure you have read the journal instructions for others, right? And including the concerns of ethical approval and various other statements that you have to declare. Make sure that you have named all authors on the paper and so on, and reference all the materials and given in-text citations and so on. Carefully check data and including the supplemental data, and declare the relevant competing interest. Otherwise, you will be again caught in conflict of interest. Be careful about that as well. Okay. And therefore, various journals have given enough ethical guidelines and checklists in order for you to assess yourself whether your product is ethical enough for you to go and submit and make sure that it's published. So I don't want to take too much on this, but let me share one final thing, which is case 1. Only 14 slides, but I will go fast as possible. Just case 1, the case of Outley I was talking about, the data points are shown there. So to prove the hypothesis, the result should lie on the curve as shown. But you can see 2 outliers. So researchers simply omitted 2 data points which were off the theoretical curve. Okay. This is a kind of fabrication or a falsification. whatever you call. So, yes, it's unethical as it would amount to falsification of data. So should include outliers and give proper reasons as to why that happens, statistically if possible, without, trimming the outliers. So it's very, very important to know about this. And there's a technical term called winsorization. That's all about you are approximating good data, near data, than completely eroding off the outliers. Winsorization. In the case 2, clinical trial is run to assess the effectiveness of a new antiretroviral therapy for patients. I took it from a medical example, patients with HIV. The primary outcome is viral load, which represents the number of HIV copies per milliliter of blood. A total of 30 participants are randomized, the patients. And Mann-Whitney U test was applied to gauge the perception of patients and doctors. Basically, Mann-Whitney U test, those who are familiar with the quantitative kind of research and statistical methods. This is a rank sum test, and Mann-Whitney U test would be ideal if you want to gauge the perception of two different categories, but administering on just one questionnaire paper written down on a certain Likert scale. We try to derive the results, and you see how concordant the both groups are. If the figures fall around 0.5, 0.85, 0.86, then we tend to say, right, yes, both parties had a proper agreement, or kind of a high agreement as to a particular opinion or preference. Okay, that is the basic idea of Mann-Whitney U test, and you can thereby either reject the null hypothesis or otherwise. Therefore, all evidence to conclude that the group's concordance were destroyed, which is terrible. Okay, you cannot purposely do it. You cannot, as Professor Chalinda said in the morning, you should not, you may expect, but you should not pursue citation. It is up to the audience to look after. Similarly, you can apply the statistic technique, but you should not expect the results you want. Let it naturally happen. And then it is your job is to interpret the data. Okay. Otherwise, it's unethical and manipulative. Then a couple of few cases like this. A group of quantitative students, which is my case, group of quantitative students conducted a research on bit deficiency. Their research was recognized as the best undergraduate research. Later, they submitted the same research paper to 2 different journals to see which journal publishes it first. Okay. Wait and see approach is also there, unethical, as it would result in an inadvertent double counting. So you should not try for 2 things. You just try one at one time. So wait and see. That's the whole idea. The other case, one student developed the idea for his project and discussed with a friend. Several months later, he found that his idea had been submitted as a research proposal by his friend without his knowledge. That is understood. So it is unethical, as failure to give due credit to the person whose idea it is. That amounts to plagiarism. That's what I say. I think the best way of dealing with this, take him as a co-author and get the maximum out. 3 students worked together on a research project. One of them went abroad during the progress and did not contribute to the research. All 3 names were included in the presentation made at the research symposium. Right? That's also not ethical. So only those who contributed intellectually should be cited as authors. Otherwise, acknowledgement is possible. Then a group of undergraduate students plan a research project on the defending claims during COVID-19. They collected data from the project they work for without informing their management. That's also wrong. It's a case study. It may have been a case study, but the management should be clear about this, what they are doing. They may be having interviews without knowing that the subjects are being interviewed for the purpose of research. It is unethical because informed consent was not taken. And finally, having approached just 5 interviewees, naming them as experts, the research concludes with a bogus statement that the price escalation formula overcompensates. This is the example that I was talking about a few minutes ago. So therefore, it's very important to know that the gravity behind not following these ethical concerns. And I must show you, you may be now seeing this one, the University Grants Commission. Just I wanted to bring your attention. Ethics and academic accountability for academic staff in the Sri Lankan university system, where the ethics for university teachers given, and content competence, a couple of ethical principles, pedagogical competence, dealing with sensitive topics, how you have to act upon. So when you say content competence, being teachers, being trainers, being lecturers, involved in the higher education sector, including me, we all owe a moral duty to make sure that we are continuously improving ourselves and maintaining a high level of our subject knowledge at the outset, and we are updated in the rapidly changing world. The pedagogical, that's all about the delivery, and so that the skills in teaching methodologies and so on. Dealing with sensitive topics, and you should not make the student discomfortable. And student development on the other hand, and so on and so forth, you may go ahead. But ethical principles in research, especially in identifying and justifying the research problems, the UGC gives a guideline how to deal with the conflicts of interest, and also the funding aspect have been addressed here. And the ethical issues in social and biological research, and also reporting of results. All relevant results have to be reported. So suppression or non-reporting of unfavorable results is unethical. Okay, and publication, duplicate publications, authorship, research fraud, and so on. So they keep on talking about different workloads, teaching and so on. But here I came across one of the very important checklists with regard to the conduct of research. Research workload weights are given. If you have time, go to website, and it is good that you have your own timeline of your career as a part of your career development, be in academics, how to inculcate or foster a research culture of your own. So this checklist will help you a lot. So the workload weights are given under so many sub headings or bullet forms given, A to U. So with that, let me wind up the session. We have been very tired and hectic, I don't know. But however, I must say thank you very much for your patience of listening to my lecture as well, despite of our busy working schedule today. So thank you very much, and let me take your permission to finish my lecture at the outset and over to Mr. Dilantha. Thank you very much.
Okay, everyone. Finally, we came into the end of the session. I think again I'm going to cordially invite Professor Chandana Jayalath to make the vote of thanks speech, sir, on behalf of the organizing committee. Professor Chandana Jayalath, please make the vote of thanks upon all the panelists and attendees who have been participated today.
Well, thank you very much for your patience and contribution to make this event a success. We have on board our Vice Chancellor sir, of the University of Vocational Technology, Senior Professor Ranjit Pemba da Silva, as well as a couple of teams also on board, and all those who join us from various parts of the country are very warmly appreciated for your contribution to make this event a success. So with that, let me take permission to wind up the session and wish you all the best. Be safe.
Thank you very much. Please keep in touch with us. We will be meet you with another exciting session. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.